Hey, Mark. I've got Dr. Browning, Mark, John, Charles Goyette, Alfonso. Okay. Hail, hail, the gang's all here.
Yeah, 2010 passed.
Week 6. All right. Sylvia, you with us?
I am with you.
Good. Ray Jean hiding in the background there?
Regine is also with us, and so is Susanna and Carolyn.
Carolyn? Okay, good. All right, I guess we'll crank it up here. It's 6 o'clock. We'll call the meeting to order for the City of Sunset Valley Budget and Finance Committee, Thursday, July 23rd, 2020. We do have a quorum present. We'll kick off the party with citizen comments. Do we have any?
Michael, congratulations on your nominee for the A Board of Directors.
Thank you, Rudy. I may have been bitten off more than I could chew there, but all right. So there's like 5 positions, 10 applicants, 3 incumbents, so there's really only 2 spots. So we'll see. All right, no citizen comments. We'll move on to minutes from 7/16. Any discussion? Is there a motion?
Move that we approve.
Mr. Belanca, thank you.
Second that, Charles.
Charles Goyette, thank you, sir. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay.
Aye.
All right, minutes approved. Moving on, Wanda?
Hey everybody, how's everybody?
Good.
So we had a council meeting this Tuesday. It was, the normal course of action, a very long one. And we did approve the audit, and we had other discussions on drainage and road, street projects on Sunset. We also discussed parking issues on Lone Oak. And then at the end of the meeting, we had kind of an open discussion on just our response to COVID and where we are and our recovery thoughts on what to do. Now, out of that discussion, we had a number of things that came up that involved the Budget and Finance Committee. One of them is looking at our financial policies. We have a number of policies, and I think when we did the policies years ago, they were written in an environment where we had revenues that were stable or growing. Now that we are in a different environment, we have to revisit them. In particular, there's one on our operating expenses. There's our reserve policy. For example, our reserve policy says that we have to maintain a reserve equal to last year's budget. Well, when it comes down to 21-22, our reserve will only have to be about $4 million. And is that really what we want to do? So we need to revisit that, and we need to look at those again. The other policy that came up is really having a more elastic budget, some sort of policy that allows for, like, if revenues go up, then this amount of budget can be approved, and maybe this amount of projects that were pre-approved can be done. So it's kind of an elasticity type of financial policy. So this is pretty critical, particularly with this budget. So I have asked that we have financial policies be an agenda item for next week. I know we're still busy and all that, but we would like to have some sort of kind of a preamble of this is our kind of the cover page of our budget, saying this is our budget, and it has to be elastic in some form or fashion, because we don't know. We don't know what our revenues are, and we may have to adjust up or down. So we need to have kind of that caveat in there that says, we need to have that flexibility and build it in our systems. So next week we'll have that discussion. So the other discussion we probably need to have is on our parking lot. So there was a request that we prioritize our parking lot from the budget perspective. Now, it's been prioritized. Some of the parking lot items have been prioritized from the other committees, and most of them, that's the appropriate place for them to be prioritized. But there may be some items that budget should be looking at from a priority. I'm not sure. I have to go look at that list. So, but it's helpful to go back and look at the list. So, anyway, that was the main. So that was the council meeting. Any questions, thoughts?
Yes, I would like to ask a question, as well as make a statement. I read yesterday or day before the analysis that Councilman Elliott sent in his newsletter, and it was pretty startling, really, because it seems to me that we're down in the weeds looking at items and arguing about whether to take them out or not when they're not essential and so forth. And based on what he found going to OpenGov and going to different sites in small cities, he found that, if I recall correctly, the amount of expenditure in Sunset Valley is 11,000 and something per citizen. And most communities similar to ours is under 2,000. For instance, Westlake Hills and Rollingwood certainly are not slouchy communities, and theirs is 1,700. And the analysis looked at the difference that it might make based on the fact that there are not as many citizens here as in some of those places, but it's not strikingly different. And that was taken into consideration. We're way off the chart. So given the fact of where the economy is right now, based on the isolation and the closures and so forth, and the main issue that I see is fear and trembling in the citizenry. And my son, who's a physician here, hears the same thing. People are not going to the doctor, they're not shopping much, and they don't intend to, no matter what the governor or the mayor of Austin says, because they're afraid of catching it now. And so the comeback is probably going to be slower than our expectations. But whether we have COVID or not is almost immaterial, because we spend so much money on things that is not a very good return. And as we go through the budget, I'll point out some of them. And I think the other thing that I'd like to say is that this budget is just unreasonably difficult to understand. I've worked with a lot of budgets, and the Security and Exchange Commission requires every company that's on the exchange to have the same format. And I know there are certain requirements of us based on funds we get from certain dedicated sources, and they have to be pointed out separately. But in our budget, it's bigger than the Ford Motor Company budget. I mean, the page after page after page, and it's like a shell game. This bit of money goes over here, but it came in here, but we took part of that, put it over here. It's crazy. It needs to be simplified, because I would defy the average citizen here, including me, to understand all of this. And it's not necessary to have to struggle with a budget like this. So we have to do something the gorilla in the room is that we're spending $11,000 per citizen on a lot of stuff. That's, for instance, the farmer's market. The budget says we spent $49,000, I think it was, for the farmer's market, and we bill them for their annual lease of $550 a month, which is $6,600. And I've been over there recently several times, and it's almost a ghost town, and it's almost embarrassing for people to come over there. Sure, certainly not doing anything good for our city. And you see people leaving with nothing, and that included me. There was no vegetable there that I would even take home. And so I think we got to get to the 30,000 foot level in this regard, but still pick at the weeds. But we need to pick a little harder. We need to cut down a lot of them.
Thank you, Dr. Browning. Terry? You're muted. Terry, you're muted.
Thank you for the, John. It's like Elvis, you know. I agree with Bob about the budget in terms of how complicated and complex it is. I do want to thank staff for the support materials they provided this time, for sure, because it was excellent. The book that they produced made it really easy for me to see the different departments and also put it in context for the big picture.
Yeah.
Now, I read Phil's analysis too. And the first thing that struck me about it was that there wasn't a single comparable with Sunset Valley that was the size of Sunset Valley, not one. There are a lot of cities in this state who have less than 1,000 people, lots and lots of them, but we didn't use them to compare to. The other thing, this is based on a course I took as a graduate student at LBJ school, and it talked about how to analyze misleading statistics. Now, there is a core cost involved in government. Let's use the police department for an example. If you set up a police department for 4 people, it's going to be pretty high per capita for those 4 people. Just the core cost of it, the core costs of setting it up. And so the more people that are covered by a service, the lower the per capita cost will be. Now, there's a couple of things about the police department that the citizens, I think, really support. Yes, we probably have the highest per capita cost for law enforcement in the state of Texas. I think if we looked at that, that's the way it would work, because we're a small community and it's a very large budget. We also have, but people feel more, and we have a low crime rate. We have excellent coverage. I wanted to refer to my notes. So looking at per capita cost of our police department, people would be just as outraged as Bob was about the 11,000 per citizen if you just look at it that way. But keep in mind that there's a core cost when you set up a department, and a ratio of, another thing to look at is staffing to number of citizens. Well, back a number of years ago, we did a study of that, and we have the best ratio of police officers to citizen in the state of Texas for a public city. It costs money to do that. So it's really a policy decision. Do we really want to spend the money to provide that kind of infrastructure and that kind of service to people?
And businesses.
But I definitely think when you start talking about per capita costs, that we can't compare to Westlake or Rollingwood. We need to compare to other cities less than 800 people, around 800 people. Thank you.
Also keep in mind, we like our subsidies, and that really drives a lot of that. We've developed a lot of programs, and also as we've added different taxes, crime tax, green tax, all those things, Dr. Brennan, I agree with you. They make things very complicated, but because they're separate taxes, they have to be segregated funds. And it is confusing. And even as Charles has said, and it's one of those things, you have to kind of be on the committee for a while and go through a couple cycles and iterations of that to really get clarity on that. But I think your point's well taken.
Yeah, I'll just make a point that governmental accounting is like a graduate accounting course, so it's not an easy thing to understand. So it is complicated, absolutely.
That was my experience too, coming from doing budgets for, in businesses, and coming to here last year and finding out that it was really a good deal more complicated to do a budget for a city, for a government entity. They're not the same.
Yeah, Charles, I remember your comment when you came on board of, hey, I thought this would be a breeze, and wow, it's really complicated. And unfortunately, the government rules are bureaucratic and very complicated. And I think OpenGov helps in terms of a large visual perspective of what's going on there. But when you, like Doug Brownie said, when you drill into the everyday stuff, this goes here, that goes there, it is complicated.
This is not to say that we can't make it simpler.
Unfortunately, we're stuck with those rules, so.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Michael, may I jump in?
Quickly.
A quick response. I agree with Dr. Browning. I think our budget it's unwieldy. It's overly complicated. It doesn't have to be that way. And I think we can do maybe sub-ledgers, to decomplicate some of the, tier the budget to some degree. I think that would be very useful. And one thing that I think is absolutely essential in order to do a decent job at knowing where we stand, how to budget. Now, granted, I'm not an accountant, but I believe and Sylvia brought this out in the last city council meeting. The cost of service. If we don't have that number, I don't understand how we can come up with a sensible budget. I truly don't understand this process. I believe we're just nickel and diming these various items. We got a shitload of cubby holes where we just stash money here, there, and everywhere. And I think I could be on this budget committee for 25 years and it still is not going to I'm still not going to find any cause to agree that this budget makes sense, is logical, is cohesive, is organized, it's well structured. I just don't believe I'll ever get there. Okay. That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Charles. We've rabbit trailed pretty good here. So let's see if we can pull ourselves back to the agenda. Sorry for part of that's my fault. My apologies for letting us, but some of that needs to be aired out. I understand the frustration. We're back to review, discuss, and possible actions on the proposed revenue projections. As you recall, our conversation last week surrounding that item and the different percentages. I'll refer you to our budget summary sheet here. The conversation was, do we stay at the 25%? Do we make a change to that going forward? Any thoughts, Terry?
Yeah, I think I agree with folks that it's not known for sure what the revenues are going to be, that it's a guesstimate at best. I think if we change the revenue estimate at this point, this close to having to turn this over to council, that we are obligated to go back through all of the departments and look for cost cutting again. I don't think we actually have time to do it. Even at the 25% level, the loss is like $900,000, $933,000, something like that. It's really significant. And it's not easy to find the how we're going to offset that. It's actually some of the offsets now. It's looking. I brought up the police department before. They're running a large deficit. I can remember back when it was a struggle for Sunset Valley just to get 24/7 police coverage, and it was such a benefit to the community when we were able to do that.
Yeah. And
I agree with the ratio of 1.5 police officers to in terms of trying to figure out shift coverage. But that budget is going to have to be part of how the deficit is offset. That budget will have to be revisited. it involves, I think, policy decisions about what do we want in terms of per capita coverage for our citizens, because we have about the best in the state of Texas. And how are we going to analyze this? If we analyze it, the number of dollars citizens spend for the police department, it's going to look really high, and it looks like it needs to be cut a lot. Even and the guidelines, I think, would be to still stay within the 1.5 and try to hold on to the most experienced officers. But that may not be what our call to make. That sounds like an elected official call to make. Like, how do we want to proceed with that? Thank you.
John? Thanks, Terry.
Just a quick comment, and I've kind of hinted at this, and other folks have suggested kind of the same thing. In years gone by, in the previous 3 years or whatever, we have built up the reserves almost back to where they were originally, right? We put a lot of money into the reserves and got it up to I don't know, if it was 10 months worth or something like that.
Yeah.
From 4 months, right? And we built it up. I don't mind that we're negative for a year, even 2 years, because I know COVID will go away. If not this year or next year, it will go away, and we can rebuild the reserves again. So it doesn't bother me. I'm sorry. I'll put a period there.
Yeah, no, I'll jump in. I think I agree with you. We had that conversation, and you asked, was there anybody that has a problem with that? And I think the consensus, and we didn't vote on it, but the consensus was that's what the reserves are for. And Terry's points taking to the point, we're 900,000. If we're going to try to make this an even budget, we've got a lot of work to do. And I just, sometimes you've got to get in the weeds with budgets, and so I disagree with the fact that we're not getting in the weeds. I think that needs to be done sometimes, but we've cut out, there's just not a whole lot of meat left on the bone here. As Terry said, now you start looking at department-wide reductions. So I don't know. I'm good with the 25%.
Well, I think we do need to get in the weeds. I didn't want to leave that as the only impression I was trying to make. I think we need to get viciously in the weeds. That's my whole point. And in my opinion, there is a lot left to cut without affecting anybody very much.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Brennan. Anybody else? Mr. Cowan, and then Charles.
Yeah, in regard to the farmers market, that is kind of a platform for marketing to rebuild revenue to Sunset Valley. Sunset Valley is a unique community. We're very small. We're almost all millionaires in Sunset Valley, and we subsidize our water rates, and we have no property taxes. We're in a position to do more than just to be that kind of community. We can be really an example community, and if we want to have uniqueness, that particular profile is not going to attract anybody to shop in Sunset Valley. But Austin really has used coolness well, and sustainable, and music, entertainment, all of this, arts, and I think that's the way to go. So I see that farmers market, that basically chump change the expense of that, as a base for helping building back our business. But I want Dr. Browning to say what other areas does he see where there could be cuts that could add up to hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Just a reminder, the market fair is hot funds, so it's not general revenue.
Yeah, we'll get there as we go through it.
Okay, Charles?
I also wanted to, I agree with both what Terry said and John said. And I think it's worth making a couple of points. One, that we don't know where revenues are going to go. I think trying to change what our projections are now just introduces chaos, as Terry pointed out. And any changes we make should be based on what actually happens, as revenues come in. We've got a month buffer to look at what the revenue changes are. We've got the reserves, right? Any decisions we make should be based on the reality of what happens, not what we think is going to happen, because so far our guesses about revenue projections really haven't been accurate. Secondly, I would agree with Dr. Browning on something that, after this budget process is over, we should really do some deep analysis of what our spending is. Like Charles says, look at the cost of service, look at all those numbers, get those numbers accurately, right, for doing future planning. But right now, at this moment, we need to get through this. This is not the time. It's afterwards, after we get through the budget process, we should do that.
Is there a motion?
Let me just say one last thing about the farmer's market.
Dr. Brown?
I've been over there a number of times, and even recently, and I have carried guests over there. I wouldn't dare do it again. I think each of you needs to go over there and see what's going on if you haven't been recently. I wouldn't take anybody else over there. On the contrary, I think it's a disgrace to Sunset Valley, and I don't think anybody would be impressed by that. And so what I think needs to happen, their contract needs to be canceled. If we want to have a real farmer's market, we need somebody to manage it, and we need to put it up for bids. But please go over there and look, because to me, $50,000 is not pocket change.
Okay, let's try to pull back to our agenda item if we could. If you want to, Dr. Browning, you certainly, if you want to visit hot funds again when we get to that agenda item, we could stop there. And if a majority of the council wants, members of the committee want to change that, we can certainly do that. Yeah, that's what our role is. So. All right, consensus then, since I don't hear a motion that we leave it at 25%. Mark, anybody else got an input on that? All right, we'll just leave it at the 25% there, unless there's any objections. Not hearing any?
I object.
All right, Dr. Browning, do you want to make a motion?
No.
Okay. All right.
I think it's going to be less than 25%, but I realize I'm a voice crying in the wilderness, so I'll sit here and wait.
Well, you might
there's another coyote out there too, Dr. Brown.
I was going to say, Charles, where are you? But
the equal opportunity alienator here. Well, we talked about this in the past. I'm for a 40%, so I'll make a motion just for shits and giggles. I make a motion to set the rate, the amount of discrepancy at 40%, and we base our budget on a 40% number.
All right, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Yeah, Michael.
Alfonso, hold on. Is there a second?
Yeah, no, I don't. No, I think that again.
Okay, hold on. Alfonso, hold on. Is there a second for the motion?
I second.
All right, there is a second. All right, go ahead, Alfonso.
Well, again, we are at 10 days to know more or less how much will be the budget. So if we were looking 2022, we had 1 month with 42%, 1 month with 11%, and we were around 25%. So they made that with 25%. Every day is worse and worse and worse. But if we can wait another 2 weeks, we will know more or less how in reality will be. And not necessarily that will pass. So at this moment, we are making numbers, so projections. So we have at this moment 25. Why we don't go with the 25? And in 2 weeks more, we will know much better how that will be. So, because again, at this moment, we will go 40%, or we will go 50%. So again, it's to make numbers. It's nothing. Don't mean nothing at this moment, because we don't know what happened later. We assume that will be less and less. But why we don't wait to do that numbers? Because what means that if we will go 40%, then we need to cut more? No. We are talking about reserves, and in reserves, we have we had almost five was for general fund was $5.1 million, the reserve. So if we reduce at this moment, so we will go to utilities. So utilities is, okay, I'm sorry, Sylvia, somebody's coming in. So we will go to utilities, and utilities is almost $600,000. So I think that at this moment is not the time to start picking. We will do a better analysis when we'll have better numbers. This is what I try to say. Thank you.
Any other discussion before we vote?
I have one more point to make.
Charles?
I hear Alfonso and what he's saying, and you know, and it's what does it really mean, you know, to implement a 40% reduction number. But I do have to make the point that the May number that we're looking at that showed an improvement based upon the earlier April number, which was what, close to 40%. That May number, that's when everybody got their stimulus checks. So that invariably had some impact on the amount, I would think, on the amount of spending that had gone on. And I would think it would uptick the numbers and make them, and make that number rather artificial. So I think in reality, had that stimulus not occurred, I think the May number would have probably been like the April number. But just speculation. I understand this. It's just speculation. Thank you.
What I will say is the worksheets and OpenGov that Susanna has up right now, she can actually reduce that revenue or increase that revenue loss to 30% and show you the number, what that looks like. Anybody's interested in seeing that.
You want to plug a 40% number in there, Susanna? Phil, can you mute?
You want 40% reduction?
Yes.
There we go. That should be the reduction now.
So we go to 3.1 in the, let's see, where am I? Where's my?
Down a little bit more. We can't see the bottom.
Yeah, so it's about an $800,000 reduction in the general fund.
Yes.
So we go from 969 and some change to almost 2 million.
No, the only way that can happen is that you have to look at the police department budget, the public safety budget.
Yeah, I don't see the point, but anyway, any other discussion? All right, Mr. Cowan.
Yeah, I did a quick look at trying to reach the 25% revenue target, and even at that, even if we would have to look at water transfers, wastewater transfers. We would have to reduce staff in the police department. We'd have to stop we'd have to stop the payment into the repair and replacement fund, and to get there, that's what it would take at 25%. And I'm talking about staff reductions in the police department. Yeah. At 40%, that's all.
It's just not possible. Not without major staff reductions, and I don't think that's the prerogative of this body. I think that's a council action item.
And,
so
and you know, the thing is, if we have a more elastic budget or a policy, we can go in, and if we find that, you know, things do look more dire, there's nothing to say we can't come and adjust and do budget amendments and do what we need to do. We don't have to do anything right today, I don't think. It's, you know, my 2 cents.
I agree. You know, one of the things we've talked about, just a reminder, guys, was and gals, that instead of doing quarterly budget financial statements, we would do monthly and really spend
Yes.
time
Yes.
really digging into those numbers. So we're going to know, you know, we're going to have a pretty good idea when we get that close through this year's budget and we plow into next year. And it's easy to go back to council and say, okay, guys, here's what's trending. We didn't do a good job, or we did a good job. And if we didn't, here's some suggestions on things to change. So, I mean, it's not like the sky is falling today. I think we can, to Wanda's point, get through what we've gotten done and continue to massage that as we go forward. But it puts a budget into place, gives council some time, gives the mayor some time to work on that. And to Terry's, we're $900,000 short. If we wanted to come up with $900,000 in cuts tonight to make a flat budget, that's not what we talked about in the very beginning. We agreed we'd go into reserves, so it doesn't make, we're saying two different things now.
Well, but we're not going into reserves, right? Of that $960,000 deficit that we have here, $930,000 of that is coming out of the street fund. We're not going into general fund reserves yet, really.
Correct.
True. Yeah.
Just the street repair for Home Depot that the guy that did the study said it's not essential now. Wasn't that 450,000?
Yes, Home Depot and ERW combined were 833,000.
Yeah, there's a big portion of it right there. You hadn't reduced any staff.
Call the question.
Okay, now we need to vote on the called question, which requires 3/4 of a vote. All in favor on calling the question, say aye.
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 Dr. Brennan, Mark,
Aye.
and Alfonso?
I'm sorry, but I was looking other numbers. We need to say yes or no about what?
I'm calling the question to vote on this item.
Yeah, aye.
Okay, good. Motion passes. All right, we'll now vote on the motion to reduce tax income from 25 to 40%. Alfonso?
No.
Charles Goyer?
Yes.
Charles Young?
No.
Mr. Blanca?
No.
Jerry? I'm sorry. We covered Mark?
No.
I think we got everybody.
Dr. Browning and
I vote no.
Dr. Browning?
I
He
vote
voted
yes.
He and Charles voted yes.
Okay.
Okay, motion fails. Somebody want to make another motion to leave that at 25, or do you want to just leave it there as consensus on the committee?
I make the motion that we leave it at 25%.
Good, thank you.
Seconded.
Who seconded?
I did.
Charles, thank you. Any discussion on the 25%?
Move the question.
All right. Okay, so let's vote on the calling the question. That needs a 3/4 majority. Anybody opposed to voting on the question? All right, the motion passes. Let's vote on it then. Starting at the top of my list, Alfonso?
Yep.
Charles
Yes.
Goyer? Charles Goyer?
No.
Charles Young?
Yes.
Mr. Blanca,
Yes.
Dr. Browning,
No.
Mark?
Yes.
I vote yes. Motion passes. Let's move on. Review and discuss the budget summary. Susanna?
If you will notice in this new summary you guys got, it has the history of all the summaries that you have received so far. So hopefully that's been helpful. Is there any questions, comments? I'll leave the rest of the analysis to you guys.
Any questions for Susanna? Susanna, thank you for pulling this together every week. Thanks for getting the binder out to everybody.
Yeah, Michael.
Mr. Carmona.
Michael.
Mr. Carmona.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to put gasoline to the fire, but when I was when I was looking the revenues from the utilities, I was looking the utility fund, and the utility fund revenues. If you see that, we start with $1.5 million, later to 1.8, and later to 1.8. Now, if you would see the difference, I tried to figure out why. So when I was looking in different pages. In page number 4, you can see that the total utilities, page number 4, total utilities is so small there, but it's 1,751,000. 1,751,000. This is total utilities, and in that place they include the subsidy and the transfers for infrastructure. When you will go to page 17, in page 17, the total it is below wastewater. If you can go below that, is page 17. Below solid waste, you will have the total. Below. You have, it's a $1.8 million. But this confused. It's confused because in that place they add $339,000 that they propose lines, and they have Sunset Trail and Lone Oak Street. So then I am confused at this moment is where, in a specific, Michael, my question is where they will put the subsidy and the infrastructure, because all of that, they are in revenues, and they cannot be in revenues because it's one expenditure. In page number 4 was revenues, and now in page 17 is expenditures. And you don't find that. So this is why I didn't try to put gasoline to the fire, but what is that? Why?
Suzanne?
Suzanne and Sylvia?
I don't think I understand the question.
Well, I think those funds are those dollars are already there, Alfonso. They're the revenues in the street fund.
No, we are not talking streets. This is utilities.
Utilities, I'm
this
sorry.
Is the
utility fund, my mistake.
So
that 339,000 is from the projects that we went over in the last meeting.
Yes.
So there's a portion of those projects for different funds, depending on how the projects were broken out.
Yeah, Susana, but in reality, the expenditures, the expenditures from utilities is 1,531,000. This is the real expenditures as a total utilities expenditures. The other is, I'm sorry,
Where are you getting that number?
I make the addition from each of that. If you will see there above, if you will see the screen, it says solid waste department. So it has $140,000, and I took from each. So when I compare these with page number 4, that is revenues, in revenues, by revenues, they gave it to me different number. That I found that they are the subsidies, and they are from the account 4,300. That is the account. So that account is for subsidy. So where they will put that subsidy? From where they will take that money?
Is that the number she's got on the screen?
At this moment, no. This is page 17.
Yeah, you said you're coming up with 1.5. Is that what she did? Was take the projects out of the?
Yeah, I took 140, 607, 782. So from that, this is the big totals from solid waste, wastewater, and water. So this is 160. You will go up. You will see later a wastewater 607.
I'm sorry, I'm lost. Suzanne, you know where he's talking about?
Yeah, he's talking about the expenses for all of the utilities. So there's the total water is 782, the total wastewater is 607, and the total solid waste is 140. Is that what you're talking about, Alfonso?
Yes, Susana. This is because this is according to the money that we will expend in utilities in these 3 areas. So from there, I try to see revenues and expenditures. And these 2 numbers, they don't match, because one of the numbers that you have in page number 4, they refer that you allocate more money due to subsidy and infrastructure, and you use the account 4,300. So I couldn't find that. Where you have that?
I see what you're saying. The 4,300 refers to trans in. Are you asking if the projects are part of the cost of the subsidies?
No, I try to say that in this case, if at this moment they are thinking in our budget, the real budget, we know that utilities, we don't pay for the utilities. So we have to subsidize. But how much we subsidize at this case, and it's not clear, that needs to be in some place. You have that in page number 4, but this, I think
the subsidies are a weird number just because they change based on how much the expenditures are. So the subsidy just makes up the difference between how much we receive and how much we spend. So that's the total amount of subsidies.
I think, Alfonso, are you asking if the project number in there is skewed by, or the utilities fund is skewed by the project, and therefore the subsidy is going to be larger?
Yeah, I think, in my opinion, again, we need to have one line that will say subsidies, because at this moment, for some people, I hear people that they say, we don't understand this budget. This is very difficult, this budget. Well, because I know more or less the budget. I know exactly where I will go. But a priori, I can tell you that nobody knew at this moment where you have in a specific the accounts for revenues and for expenditures, but you separate that in page number 4. But in page number 4 is still, when you are making the difference between revenues and utilities expenses, is a big difference. You have in the other 1,733,000 versus with the other than was 1,531,000. So I tried to figure out why, and I saw that you have the subsidies was $600,000.
So where's the subsidy amount? Can you show us that?
You have
Yeah,
to go
there's a
to
subsidy in each
Let's go.
different section. So there'll be water subsidy here. This is going to be your page 3. You'll also have wastewater subsidy here and solid waste subsidy here, totaling about $604,000.
Is that what you're after, Alfonso?
Yeah, but look, I think that again, the big problem is you have a lot of numbers, and the numbers, they are there. But perhaps the people will be hard to look for that numbers if you are looking for that. Why? In the business, the enterprise, the utilities has to be clear. And in that clear, we have to have how much is the revenue, how much is the expenditure, and how much money you need to add to cover that service. And in that way, we will have a better criteria, because later the city council, they need to have the decision, because $600,000 will be, you're talking 15% of the budget. So that will be a decision. This is that I try to say, Michael. That's all.
Michael?
Yeah, Regine, can we just, Suzanne, can you tote those 3? Because they do say transfers in, but if you can just tote those 3, that'd be good. Terry?
Yeah, I just added them to the utilities at the bottom, so we have it when we go back to utilities to look at the totals.
604, yeah. Regine?
So I'm just trying to understand or it makes sense. So in the past, the utility budget, not including the projects, just the regular expenses, the revenue and the expenses were the same number. And if you look at this, the revenue is 1751, but the expenses are 1.5 million, and this is 1.7. So there's got to be either I can see what he's talking about, that the numbers don't match, and they should. And I'm not quite sure how the subsidies were just done, but I don't know what that number. If you add that 1.5 million and that 600, does that come up to the 1751,905? Susanna?
No, Regine. We try to look as a semantic. Total utility expenses. Page number 17, $1.8 million. Page number 4, 1.7.
Alfonso,
Yes.
I'm trying to get to the 1.5 million, 1.530. That's the expenses without the projects. Okay, let me get to where I need to get. The 1.5 3.0 and then 604. What does that add up to? I can't do that. Yeah, add those two up. So what does that equal?
It's 2.1, but I have it set up so it automatically takes the difference here. Why are you doing that?
Yeah, in a few words, Michael, everything,
Yes.
Everything is there. But if they are talking about total utilities expenses and total revenues expenses, they need to be according one with the other. This is all that I try to say. It's not clear there.
So,
and it's very, very important.
You're in agreement the numbers are all there. What you'd like is more transparency.
Well, they are talking different between one page and other, because they add some of the projects. That is not bad, but it's totally different.
Terry?
Yeah, I agree with Alfonso, because I went through and tried to isolate the subsidies too, and it was not straightforward. It wasn't easy, and it's a figure minus revenues minus infrastructure costs, and I don't see us handling it other items that way. It seems like there's special treatment going on here. Maybe I'm not fully understanding. That's very possible. But I think Alfonso has a good point. That needs to be clear. That needs to be handled the same way we're looking at all the other expenses and revenues.
You know, one of the things we don't have this year, and I recognize in the changeover that fell off, was in the past few years, we've had and when Clay was here, and Ray Jean, you remember this, we went through the entire budget and we identified all the subsidies that were sprinkled throughout the budget. And we had a sheet titled subsidies, and it had everything in there, everything that was funded out of the general fund that went as a direct benefit, like, you know, the water utilities and fire protection, all those things. And we don't have that this year for whatever reason, but there is a sheet that identifies all of those and has the numbers tied to that. I think we could probably revisit that between now and next week and get that out to everybody.
I agree.
Could drill into that.
Susanna?
Yeah.
So if you just change that word operating transfer in to subsidy received from general fund, that clarifies that line. Does it, y'all? Because that is a subsidy from the general fund. I don't know if the amount is where it needs to be, but that will clarify up what that operating transferred in. That'll make it a subsidy. And then on the general fund, you'll have an exact line item that says subsidy to the utility fund. It'll be a negative amount.
Why do you have a subsidy from the general fund? Why not just say it's an expense and put it there in the first place rather than putting it in general fund and take it over and put it somewhere else?
Well, that's a good question, because we always want to keep track of what those items are that we fund out of the general fund and not just list it as an expense.
Because this is a revenue report. Am I looking at the revenue report, right?
And we're on the revenue.
So it's a revenue from the general fund. It's not an expense. It's a revenue. And so
that's what I'm talking about. If it's a revenue and you have an expense over here that revenue needs to be initially attached to, why don't you just put it there in the first place?
This is a revenue report. It's not an expense report.
Not on the expense side yet.
Right. We're not on the expense side yet. We're on the revenue report.
But this occurs, you say, as a subsidy.
In the general fund, it is an expense.
Well, I still don't understand what you're saying. It's not an expense to the general fund. It's an expense, period. And we take revenue and attach to it. And you don't put it in and call it a general fund.
The reason behind that is because utility fund does not make enough money in revenues to cover all of its expenses. So money has to be transferred in from somewhere else.
It runs
you made
negative.
my point beautifully.
Yeah, no, that's not an unknown. We do it every year, and
I know that. And then that's the question: is that necessary, reasonable, and do other cities do it? And the answer is no, almost universally.
Well, I think the city of Austin does it in reverse out of electrics, right? They use electric, they generate revenue, and
most
they transfer
cities do it out of reverse.
So everybody does it a little differently.
Most cities make money in their utility accounts.
But we don't
make the utility fund fees, utility fees, and make the utility department pay for itself, people would stroke out. I mean, it'd be a huge number. It should be. I agree. My personal feeling is it should operate and pay for itself. But maybe council wants to start on a transition and slowly beginning to less and less subsidies, and maybe that's what needs to happen. So we actually pay the cost of things. But that's
what is the subsidy per person, per inhabitant?
All right, well, hold on. We're really getting off track here. Are there any other questions on the budget summary?
Yeah, can I just ask one thing to Ray Jean, Susanna? When the auditors come in and they look at how we characterize this and how we make these transfers, is that an appropriate, do they have issues with it, or is it appropriate accounting?
It is appropriate accounting. We are one of the few cities that do that, but we are accounting for it the correct way. It's a subsidy, or it's a transfer out of the general fund, transfer in to the utility fund. And then the way we calculate that is we get all the expenses of the utilities minus the revenue, and what's left over is the amount that we subsidize out of the general fund. So that 702 in wastewater, that should be the amount of the expenses in the wastewater fund. And we'll have to look at that and see how that come out. Like on page 17, whatever that number is.
Yeah. Susanna, Regine, I think Dr. Browning and Alfonso are making a good point. I think again, that's one of those jargon things, and I think Charles would say the same thing. I understood what was going on there, but maybe we retitle that on both ends, on the income and the expense end, and title it subsidies, or work that into the phrase so people have clarity on that.
Yeah, go up on this form that's showing. Can you go back to page? Yeah, go up so I can see the wastewater number.
Yeah.
I can't see the wastewater. So that 607 should match that 702, and that's what I don't know. We'll have to figure out what that is.
I think it's because of the utility infrastructure, that 905. Let me just double check that though. Yeah, that's what it is. The difference in the cost between them is the utility infrastructure that we add to there.
Okay.
So we can fix that. We can make that to where it makes more sense. That at least we know where that number's off. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, speaking of other numbers off, I thought last week we cut the emergency funds as it's like 25,000 in the water fund and 15,000 somewhere else.
We did.
That was cut.
It was.
It's not reflected in this.
Yes, we cut 40,000 total, 15,000 up there on line number. Oh, she moved. Yes, we cut that one. And then we cut 15,000.
Okay, those adjustments are made on our sheets. Are we working off the same documents?
We should be. It looks like I just missed one of them.
Do you find all, Susanna, when you did that? Bottom, find all.
Are there
bottom.
any more besides the ones in utilities, or is it just utilities?
Should be just utilities. There was a $15,000 one. And a 20.
Right.
Yeah, there you go. See right there.
There it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're all taken out now.
Good. When we finish, if we can get a fresh copy of all the sheets to committee members, that'll go to council or to the mayor.
Are we looking at other errors or anything like that while we're here?
No, I think that was the end of our conversation on the summary, unless there was any other summary items to cover.
Well, if there's some errors, please bring those up because they affect the summary.
I don't think it was an error, but at one point I was looking at the hot tons and I think something was mislabeled, but I don't in OpenGov. And that was
yes, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yes,
it was a farmer's market, and I've updated it.
Perfect, thank you.
Both in OpenGov in here.
My assumption, Sylvia, is that we're all working off the same document. So if the change is on my sheet, my assumption is it's on your sheet as well.
Yes, should
that may
be.
not be the case.
I haven't changed this since I sent out everybody's sheet, so they should match what I have.
Okay, Charles Young, did you have a question? No? Okay. Okay, anything else on the summary? All right, pushing through to the utility rates.
Oh,
Susanna, you want to open up the presentation Rudy sent earlier today?
What's that?
Yeah.
It's a presentation that the city council went over when discussing utility subsidies. It was it was back in May. Here we go. But that's going to be for Councilmember Rosengarten had some, I think, comments when you guys go into the utility fund. So Susanna, if you'll jump back over to the utility fund sheet, and you can bring that up whenever there's any questions, if there's any questions. Thank you.
Well, Rudy, if you want to jump into it before we start off our conversation, that might be better than after we have that conversation.
Actually, this is a presentation by Councilmember Reeds and Councilmember Ellett. I just wanted to refer to it while you guys are going to be discussing utility rates.
Susanna, you want to bring it up? Let her go through it. Okay. Go ahead, Rudy.
Okay. This was a presentation, like I said, by Councilmember Reeds, and she showed the breakdown of the water, wastewater, and solid waste. And then the next page, she's showing, and what I circled is the water conservation subsidy. Now, the reason I circled that is because people who do not use more than 3,000 gallons do not pay any water use whatsoever. So I circled that to bring that to everybody's attention. And you would think just not using more than 3,000 gallons alone is a benefit to staying underneath 3,000. 3,000 gallons of water is about $9.83. Okay, but it adds up to 26,000 for the year for our city. If you look over to the left in the gray area, I have a little note at the bottom. The expenses over revenues are 127% on water. Now let's go down to wastewater. The expenses over revenue is 127% on wastewater. Now let's go to solid waste. Scroll down. Solid waste, the expenses over revenue is 3,205%. So if you start talking about reducing subsidies, I would shine the light on solid waste.
Yep.
Then when you come on down past the total subsidies was 452,040. Again, now we'll go to the rates page. Again, there's a conservation rebate that if you use under 3,000, even though you have 0 to 999 gallons, you pay 3.31. But then you go to the rebates program, and in the rebates, if you use less than 3,000 gallons, the city pays for it. So you have no water bill whatsoever. You simply pay your monthly base fee. To me, that should have never happened. Go to the next page on subsidies. And right here in my red outline box underneath no monthly base fee, this is why I believe it shouldn't happen. Anybody who has a well can water their grass with their well water. Thus, they can keep their inside house gallons below 3,000 gallons a month. Then they don't have to pay any water whatsoever except for their base monthly fee. To me, that's not fair. If our argument is that everybody should pay what they use, the people who use under 3,000 gallons, and that's me too, by the way, and I don't have a well. Many times I use under 3,000 gallons, especially when it's not summertime. I think we should pay for water up to, for that 3,000 gallons, in my opinion.
Agreed.
Now go to the questions part. These statements here are great statements, and the answers. Households with large manicured lawns are the most subsidized because they use more water. No, they pay cost or above cost for water and wastewater usage over 10,000 gallons. Households who water lawns all year long should pay more in wastewater. They do. Households who have a winter average rate above 10,000 gallons pay cost at $5.71. We have more millionaires in this city. Why do we need subsidies? We have no idea regarding number of millionaires, but we would guess that there are also some folks on fixed income budgets. Retired folks. Can we do some type of dividend program instead of reduced rates? No, this is illegal. Okay, next, changes in subsidies. Where I underlined in red, if we need to make changes, what can we do without a cost of service study? Each time the discussion of cost of service study is brought up, it hurts my brain. Let me explain. Hurts my brain because we all know that we are not charging enough for water, wastewater, and solid waste. Why do we need to do a cost of service study and spend $20,000 of taxpayer dollars to tell us that we know that we are not charging enough for water, wastewater, and solid waste? We could use that $20,000 to continue this $20,000 subsidy. Continuing on, then on the question page, it explains exactly what I just said. The first line or sentence, that was answering somebody's question. You go down, why do a cost of service study to justify why there's a rate increase? We all know we're under cost for the majority of services except for the high-end users. If you spend money on a cost of service study to tell you what you already know is wasteful taxpayer dollars. Instead, simply apply a rate increase if you're going to do that. Love the idea, if we need to make changes, what can we do without a cost of service study? Well, you can simply increase rates. We already know we're under cost. And I would get rid of the conservation program because it rewards those who would not use more than 3,000 in the winter anyway. I would add $15 for solid waste. That breaks down to $3.75 per week. So if you think about it, what we really are getting in solid waste, because I watch TDS pick up all my bags of debris and branches and so on, and I think I'm paying $1.84. That's a heck of a good deal, and I like keeping money in my pocket. But at some point, we all agreed that if it started to get to the point where we are worried about our expenses, then we all have to start chipping in. When you put an increase in solid waste, it's an even expense to all. So instead of touching water, except for the conservation program, I would touch solid waste because it becomes a fixed dollar amount every month. And a lot of people are hurting right now. While they are home, they're using more water, washing their hands. Of course, they're just purposely using more water because they're at home all day long. So if we went to solid waste, it would be something they could budget a little easier. Let's see, I already explained that. And I'm done on the presentation. And again, thank you, Councilmember Reeds, for this presentation.
So thank you, Rudy. So just some thoughts there. These numbers in this presentation were from last year's budget. And our actual, because we had done a better evaluation on actual salary costs, the subsidies should be reduced. Before we had the salaries that were put into the water budget were equivalent to 22 man hours a day, and that's just not what happens. And so, you know, a better a understanding and a better allocation of the actual cost is really one of the points I wanted to get across with this presentation. The other thing is that when we did that cost of service study, those budget assumptions, all those salary costs were just given to the people who did the cost of service study. And so they just took that information and didn't verify that, no, we don't really do 22 hours a day of work in our water system. So there's some inaccuracies, and even when you do a cost of service study, you have to be very, very careful about your assumptions. And the firm that does it has to really question every assumption to make sure they're accurate. So that's one of the concerns, that it's a very time-consuming thing to do, and it would take a lot of staff time too. So I think we can do a lot of things without a cost of service study.
So the Texas Rural Water Association and Councilmember Gonzalez turned us on to, they can do it for free, and they have offered to do it for free. They're supposed to come give a presentation during the month of August to the council. However, it's going to be some of the same information Councilmember Reeds pointed out, that they would just take our data and analyze it and come up with a number. So one of the inherent flaws in our subsidies right now was the staff assumptions that were made without truly a cost of service or a time and motion study of, do we really do that? The fact that we're moving to automated meters, but we didn't purchase the software, you know, those are the kinds of things that, you know, we wouldn't have to spend a week reading meters if we implemented the software portion. That's a reduction of staff time, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, there's a software cost, but, you know, we're also dictated by the city of Austin that we move in that direction as a water conservation measure to measure our water usage more closely and to identify leaks. So lots of things like that to consider in where we are at this point and where we're going to be launching into the next couple of years as we really analyze where we are in our utility rates.
Terry, then Mark. You're muted, Terry. You're muted. Terry, you're muted. Still can't hear you.
Let's see. Oh,
Michael, can you see my hand up?
No, sir.
Terry Cowan, try that now. Sorry.
And Dr. Brown, it won't take me long. I just wanted to verify $5.71 per 1,000 gallons. Is that the wholesale cost?
Susanna, can you scroll back up to that?
Mark and then Dr. Browning.
I believe it was real close.
Okay, just a brief comment. I think this is great.
Hold on 1 second. Hold on.
Yeah, scroll up, Susanna.
Which slide was that on?
It's scroll up further. It's in the actual cost between water and wastewater. There you go. Scroll down.
You passed over it.
There you go.
Right there.
So what we pay City of Austin per 1,000 is what? Or for the first 10,000? I'm just trying to, 571 per 1,000.
These are what we charge the residents. Regine, do you have our, you know, what we pay for the City of Austin is, I believe, $578,000 a year. What's that number exactly?
That number is.
Susanna or Regine?
Yes, that's a pretty important number to know what the wholesale cost is when analyzing the rate structure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Terry, when I did this presentation, I asked that same question, and I believe it's around 550, 560, something like that. So it was it's very, very close to 571.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and it would be helpful to have that before we turn into our report to the council as far as recommendations. But I'm just saying it for the chairman if he wants to get that. The second thing is the cost of service study. It sounds like we want to avoid it. Now, I understand that there's a $20,000 cost, but another vendor says they won't charge us $20,000. What are the other concerns about not doing the cost of service study?
Well, from a regulatory standpoint, we're supposed to back up our fees with the Public Utility Commission. And we have such a disparate amount between what we charge our commercial customers and what we charge our residential customers. So that's the first thing. There shouldn't be such a big skew. The second thing is I'm afraid that they would come back and say, well, you need to adjust your residential rates by X, and that amount would be, that amount would be too high for our residents, truly. Right. But, you can't avoid it. We have to do one. The Rural Water Association will do it for no cost. So we don't have to spend the $20,000. It's just not going to be done in time for this budget year.
Yeah. Okay, and I have a final question. I understand the city of Austin is messaging that they want to get out of the wholesale water business.
Yep. Amen.
So where are we at with the planning that we have to go back to an independent water system?
Well, it's not necessarily going back to an independent water system. What the city of Austin has filed with the state in their long-term water plan that Sunset Valley is also a part of, what their messaging is that each entity is going to have to acquire its own water rights. It's still going to be treated and go through the city of Austin's treatment and distribution system, but we have to negotiate those rights and things with the aquifer districts or wherever our water source is going to be. So in other words, the city of Austin doesn't want to get dinged or pinged for having to cover Sunset Valley or any other small city's use. We need to be negotiating those rates and those water rights with the entity directly.
All right, thank you. Did we maintain our right to pump with the aquifer?
Yes, I'd like to speak to this report. I think it's very good. To me, it points out two things: how much undercharging we are and how reluctant we are to try to continue to live in 1950s or 60s. And that's just sooner or later it's going to blow up on us, and we're not going to live anywhere except in Austin. But having said that, the numbers itself, even if you raise the rates, pale in comparison to the rate increases that Travis County has made on its taxes. And we have no city taxes. So that's a huge saving for all residents. And so I can't believe we spend this much time arguing about something that's obvious. We have to raise these rates, and we can do whatever's reasonable, and we can get anybody we want to tell us what to do, but we can figure it out ourselves. We know how much we're losing, and we can't afford to lose. And it's really frustrating to sit here and listen to this conversation about how can we not change and stay in the 60s? That's not an option.
After Mark, I'll share some history with you. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing up this presentation, because I think it provides more up-to-date information. I agree that the idea of moving to a gradually moving to a fully balanced budget with regards to our utility expenses makes a lot of sense to me. I like the idea that Rudy, you mentioned about where we can make some changes based on things that we already know, like the solid waste. How we introduce that, I think, is up to the council, right? Do they want to do that over a period of time? Do they want to do that, more abruptly because we're in a current crisis mode? but it's basically we're paying for it, you know, and we're not getting the revenues, you know, and so it's an area that we're always reluctant to touch. This is a time for us, I think, when we could, you know, benefit from, you know, the citizenry taking a closer look here and saying, why are we spending $450,000, you know, out of our general fund where we don't have that money necessarily and to spend in this context we have in the past. And if we are going to move in that direction, I think it would be great if you know, the committee made a recommendation to council that said that, you know, we want to make some adjustments, and, you know, whether, like I said, if it's gradual or not, that's up to council. But I agree that getting closer to being a break-even budget, you know, from that utility sense is where we need to be.
I agree, Mark. Dr. Browning, this has been this way for a very, very long time. And when there was more revenue than there was expenses, it was easy to justify the transfer. I think obviously that's changed now. And you say we're arguing the history is, we're talking it through because we've known for a very, very long time that it's been this way. But now it seems like with all the shifts that it warrants a more harder look at in terms of being a fund that pays for itself. I agree. It seems kind of simple, but I know staff has done water rate studies where we went out and we asked different communities and we brought that back, and councils in the past have not wanted to make those changes. So there has been a move to try and do that, but it does require the council to take action on that. Now, it's a much different game right now because of the money, and maybe now is the time to say, maybe this fund, as Mark said, needs to start paying for itself with something as simple as, like Rudy said, paying for the trash. We pay out, I wrote that number down here, we pay out $76,000 to pick up the trash. And we don't charge that. I mean, that's a way to start. Let's just call it break even on trash and extra trash cans. That's a place to start. That would generate $76,000, right? Just like that.
And I agree with everything you said. And I think the issue is it's going to take, and this is a good time, as the Democrats like to say, you shouldn't leave any crisis unutilized. But this might be the one and only time we can do it before we get into a bigger hole. So whether you do it gradually or all at once, it's irrelevant compared to the taxes they're paying on their property.
John, and then Charles.
Sure.
And also myself.
Hold on, Alfonso. John, Blanca.
I have no comment at this time. I think everybody knows my position, I think.
Yes. Well, there are some new members here, so perhaps you should restate your position.
Okay. First of all, I would say that anybody running for city council ought to make very clear whether or not they want to eliminate subsidies or cut the subsidies, and we'll see what the voters say about that. Okay, that's a comment for anybody running for city council. To me, this water subsidy is an expense. It is something that it's either that or I'm going to build a park at the end of Sunset Trail, right? Or I'm going to do something with the uplands, or it's an expense. And I think it's an expense that everybody gets the benefit of. Whereas an improvement to the uplands or putting a park at the end of Oakdale is a benefit to certain people. Having a solar subsidy of $15,000 or whatever we had was a benefit to anybody that wanted to that didn't have trees over their house, right? And they could put that solar system in, and they got the benefit. Water subsidies are a subsidy or a benefit to every single person in the city. And for that reason, I support it. And I don't think it's up to us to modify the proposals to city council. If they let them take the heat, let them say, I want to do this, right? That's on them. And I hope if they do that, they lose the next election. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, John. Mark? Oh, I'm sorry, Charles. You guys are right next to each other on my screen.
And we look so much alike.
And of course, the hat and everything.
I just wanted to say that, yeah. Kind of going back to something that Wanda and other people's mentioned about our elastic budget. I think it would be nice if we had a system where we are able to pay for our water subsidies, right? That our rates are at the level where we break even on them. I know that people love their subsidies, and to the extent that the city is able to pay out those subsidies, I think it should. But I think it should be a decision on a yearly basis by the council that that we're going to devote this much money to subsidies based on the revenues that we have.
Okay.
Does that make sense when I said that?
Yeah, I got you. Alfonso?
Okay. I think that at this moment, when we say subsidies, we are taking that as a very easy point for some people, and for others it's very difficult. If we are talking water and wastewater, we have to analyze, in the first thing is our rates. Our rates in water and wastewater, they are low. They are low, and also the tiers that we have, we are using different numbers. As we can see, 0 to 99,000, 10,000 to 19,000, 20,000. The city of Austin, they are using 5 tiers. It's 0 to 2,000, 2,000 to 6,000, 6 to 11, 11 to 20, etc. So with that numbers, they found that the people, they cover the use of the service. And in our case, we don't have that tiers. And it's very often that in summertime, the people is abusing of the water because they try to be below the 20,000, but a lot of people, they will go 20, 30, 40, 70,000 or more in this city in 1 month because only they pay $9.92. In Austin, they will pay $14. So it's 1.5%, 150%. So we are not looking only at rates. And it's true, some people, they abuse of the water. If they want, they are not millionaires, so et cetera, and they pay for the water, and they don't pay the real cost of the water. So the rates, they have to change. And the structure that we have, in my opinion, needs to change. So for water and wastewater, the city almost pay 100% of the water and the wastewater. So we don't pay 70% to the city of Austin. If you will see the numbers with the staff, they charge 1,000 gallons of water is 1,000 gallons of wastewater. So we pay for that. And not necessary because some of that evaporate, et cetera. So water and wastewater. In that area, we are using only 25% of the water. So the city, when we say, no, the citizens, they need to pay, and with that we will have, no, it's only 25%. So we have to increase, we have to change that rates, but that will be only the equivalent to 25. The business is 50%. So that is also is something that is, hello? Is something that we have to think. So in this case, if we change, and with all respect to Sylvia, we don't have, hello? So we don't have a big, I'm sorry, Michael?
Oh, go ahead, you're right.
So we don't have a lot of big discrepancy between the rates, between the citizens and commercial. The commercial is also making good deal with us. Excellent deal with the water and wastewater. So, but we have to adjust that. In solid waste, it's illogical that we pay $1.84 every month for that service. So that is expensive. Solid waste pertain more to the citizens than all subsidies. So solid waste is something that we have to analyze, and we can provide some suggestions. And going to the point, my suggestion in this case is, if we will do some change, we have to change the tiers. We have, as they say, for example, we have 19 wells. The people that they have wells, also they are tied with the city. So that's a little unfair. The other is the 10,000 gallons. If you use less than 10,000 gallons, so you don't pay, they say 10,000 gallons enough. If you pay less than 1,000, you don't pay some wastewater. So that is not possible, because this is why we are not making money in wastewater. So we have to change all of that kind of things. And a lot of people, they use less than 3,000 gallons in the city. When I say a lot of people, I am telling you sometimes 70 people, 60 people in 1 month. And 60 people is almost 25% of the population. So we have to look at that. And if we will do some proposals, I think that the city council, they need to analyze very, very careful, and not necessarily this committee. This is my suggestion.
So may I add one more point that I found in this presentation is that in the cost of service study, we found the cost of service study found that the commercial was underpaying wastewater rates by 22%. And so the council at that year said, okay, we're going to phase them in to get them up to cost. And so they charged an additional 11%, but I do not believe they ever came back and did the other 11%. So it's not only residential, but I do think it's commercial. Now, right now may not be the right time to do that, but you know, that would be one of the benefits of the of a study, and it'll be interesting to see if that the Texas Rural Commission can do that. So just information for you.
Thank you. Carolyn, how many users are there, residential users? Carolyn? Regine, do you know?
Almost 240. Almost 240.
240?
Yeah, they are 236, 238, but sometimes 240.
Correct.
I was gonna say 248, but Alfonso probably knows better than I do at this point with the changes.
So if we charge just what solid trash waste is costing us, it would go from $1.84 to $26, right? $76,154 is the number off the budget, divided by 240, divided by every month. That's what we're talking. We're talking about going from $1.84, and that's a weird number, to 26 and some change.
Yeah, from 184, if you are using 240, you will go to $25 per month, and
Yes.
that gave it to you. That gave it to you the 73,000.
Mm-hmm. It would be an increase of $24.55 a month.
It looks like Goyette has his hand up.
Charles?
Thank you, Susanna.
Sorry, guys, I don't see hand raising here, so.
Oh, okay. Well, all right. So my 2 cents. I agree completely with what John Belanca had to say. And I also highly support what Alfonso had to say. I think we need to approach this very judiciously, very scientifically, very technically. You know, and just a general comment about, I don't understand why I'm getting this feeling like I need to feel guilty about receiving something from the city. And I made a statement earlier about the fact that, what Dr. Browning talked about, making reference to Phil Ellett's letter, his July newsletter. He talked about the, how to out of balance the city cost per resident is in this city with regard to other cities in our area. And I understand what Terry Cowan was saying about scale. But something else in that letter that Phil Ellett pointed out is with regard to this subsidy that is such a hot button issue. It represents a very small portion of that 16,000, whatever that number was, $16,000 per resident. It's under 5%. So there's a lot of other places I think that we could look at if we want to improve the city's bottom line. So, I mean, I don't want to feel guilty about receiving something from the city. And what John said, I think is very appropriate, that it applies to all people or to most people. I mean, everybody can seize this benefit, as well as the water conservation mechanism is in that's wrapped within. Now, with regard to solid waste, it seems to be, really kind of out there, very obviously out of skew with reality. But until we really look at the whole thing and put that before the residents in a very technical fashion, I don't get it. I don't get why, the people within the city, the people particularly in this committee, are so hell bent on spending more money of their own money and possibly subsidizing the city so they can spend that money elsewhere on infrastructure or on employees. All right. Thank you.
Well, okay, Terry, go ahead.
Yeah, in regard to solid waste, there are nonprofit private alternatives to that. That's primarily, they take what we put in that and they compost it. And there are a number of alternatives that citizens could have. They can compost their own solid waste, but they could also contract with nonprofit private. And I think it's less than the $25 a month that if we charge full cost for that. So that seems to me a place where we could save money is drop the solid waste. It's $1.84 to people. That's not a lot, I don't think people would feel it, would notice it.
And Charles, nobody's advocating that we go full throttle tonight. We're talking about the conversation because the climate is such that those side of things need to be examined. And that is our responsibility as a committee, is to examine all those items and say, do we want to continue on with that vein or make a change, make a suggestion to council? That's all we're saying. $1.84 to $26 is a 1,300% increase. So maybe we want to be a little bit gradual in our transition to charging a little bit more for that, or at least for the extra card. And the fact that people with wells don't pay for water, while they're part of that cost is not just the water, it's the infrastructure. All those pipes, all those people, all that stuff has to be supported, right? So maybe there should be a little bit of a change, and council should look at that, say, everybody should pay something for the infrastructure. If you want to adjust the water, okay, but there should be, in my personal humble opinion, there ought to be some cost just to have the standby, right? So if I need it, my well goes out and I have to turn on the spigot, then I have the ability to do that. Terry?
Yeah, there are two categories of people with wells. There's one category, people with wells that are hooked up to the city water supply. And there's another category of people with wells who are not hooked up to the city water supply.
Mr. Cowan.
Yeah, like myself. And the city didn't put in water lines over here. My tap is right in the city of Austin line if I want to use it. So we would need to differentiate that. Thank you.
It's a complicated issue. It's a very passionate one, as we've seen tonight. People are all over on this, but we're talking about it, and that's the first step.
Michael, I will tell you that the Planning and Environmental Committee has recommended a $10 fee to solid waste, which would generate about $36,000 a year.
You know, and I'm good with that, along with an extra cart. I mean, if you're just saying, hey, I want another cart and it's free, well, I don't know the rest of us should pay for that. I mean, it would seem like at a minimum, extra cart should be added onto that, right?
People pay for their extra cart, Regine, right? People pay for their extra cart. That's not part of the free stuff.
Yes.
Okay.
People
Okay.
pay for it. It's $10.27 a month.
Mhm.
Okay. All right, that's covered. But even that's not enough, right? The real cost is $26.44. So that's even half.
Michael, you know, in regard to the issue of we need to be compared to smaller towns. I talked to Phil about that some time ago, and he made the point that I was fixing to make, and that is if he'd done that, it would be even worse. Because I have property in several states, in both rural and urban, and these are the lowest water rates anywhere, even where there are lines out in rural areas on the edge of town. It's much more expensive than here. This is an unbelievable situation. And I don't think we need to be giving it away, no matter what your excuse is, whether you got a well or don't have a well. But it's just a fact that we spend too much money for our size of our city. And like I said a while ago, I tried to get 40% and couldn't. And then I asked about what's the cost of those two projects at Home Depot and the other one, I forgot what it is. That's $900,000 right there. And the engineer, I asked him the question when he was here. He said, no, it doesn't have to be done right away. It can be put off a year, 2 years. Sooner or later, you'll need to do it. So why in the world are we even considering things like that now? It doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, those projects were recommended from Public Works, and so we're not.
Well, that's
whoa. So that's where that came from. So that argument would be never made with them, right? We didn't make that decision. They just said, here's the ones that are really at critical mass. If the council wants to revisit that, or we want to revisit that as a committee, we can certainly do that. But we're going on the committee's recommendations for those.
Michael?
Well, we don't take all the committee's recommendation. And why would we take that if the engineer himself that did the study said it doesn't need to be done now? And I go over there every other day to Home Depot working on my rentals and so forth. And I couldn't tell there's anything wrong with the street. It's not in bad repair.
Okay, Alfonso?
Yeah, Michael, I would like to be, maybe it's a motion or something, but I would like to go to the point. I think that we need to start looking the city of Austin, the water and wastewater rates that they have. I think that we can copy. If we don't need to spend $20,000 in one study, we can copy. And we can evaluate that rates and we can apply in our city. And if we are doing per 1 year, we will gain more than if we are not doing nothing. But looking these stairs, I think that we can catch a lot. And some people will be, if not happy, they will be satisfied because they feel that it's unfair and a lot of people is abusing of the water. And I saw a lot of grass. Believe me, looks like a carpet. They are using a lot of water. And if they use the water, they need to pay for the water. But they need to pay according with another rate that will cover more service. And in a lot of cities, when you mention about infrastructure, people, they have to pay. We used to have, if I remember, if the house was 300 feet close to the water line, they must be tied to the water line and they must pay for a lot of things to tie, and later they have to pay for some equipment infrastructure. Here, we don't have that. The people also is using wastewater. So how much wastewater they will use if you don't read in the meter almost nothing of water. So they don't pay wastewater for say that. But again, I would like to make more specific as a motion or something that we need to consider to use the water and wastewater rates from the city of Austin. And in that way, we will have a better idea about much better revenues than we have now and fair water. Thank you.
So your motion was to adopt the water rate?
Yes. In that way, we will save money and we will have a better idea. These people from Austin, they pay a lot of money for this study, and we can use that. Only looking the rates is not difficult, and we can do that here. And believe me, in 1 year, we will see the difference. This is my proposal.
Okay, there was a motion to adopt the City of Austin water and wastewater rates. Is there a second to that motion?
Maybe the people, they don't know. They don't know if they don't have that. I have this in my face, so this is why I understand exactly. But maybe the people, they don't know, or members of the committee, and this is difficult for them to say yes or no because they are not familiar with that. But
well, I'm quite familiar. I have 2 duplexes in the city of Austin.
Me
and
too.
I'll tell you, if you try to install those Austin rates, people will panic.
I think it needs to be a slower transition, but
Well, I was going to say we should really do an analysis if we were to convert to an Austin rate structure, what that really means. And that should not be difficult to do.
I think, Sylvia, we have at this moment some group of engineers and a little study, $2,000-3,000 or less, and they can give it to us a good idea.
okay, is there a second for the motion? Not hearing a second, the motion dies for lack of second. Guys, it's almost 8 o'clock and we have not hit to revisit the different budget items. We can keep talking, but I think we're kind of at a point where do we want to take some action tonight on the utility rate structure? One of the recommendations was a $10 increase, so it would be $11.84 is my understanding for solid waste.
I'll make that as a motion.
Dr. Brown, Dr. Browning made the motion. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, Mark. Thank you, Mr. Bruner. Second that. All right, discussion. John?
None.
No, I thought your hand was up.
I
Anyone to
was going to
speak?
make a motion, but that's right.
Okay. In favor of or against the motion? Any discussion? All right, hearing none, we'll go to a roll call. Alfonso? We'll come back to Alfonso. Charles Goyette?
No.
Alfonso?
I am thinking.
Okay, I'll come back to you. Charles Young? You're muted.
I think it's a good initial step. Yes, I think we need to do a real study about this at some point. However,
Mr. Blanca?
No.
Mark?
Yes.
Dr. Browning?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. Motion passes.
Did Mr. Carbone register a vote?
Oh, we didn't go. Alfonso, what was your vote?
Everybody say then yes, but I think that we need to think more about that. I will say no.
Okay, motion passes. So no change to the utilities, water, wastewater, but just the only suggested change is to adjust solid waste. Okay. Based on that, Suzanne, you'll make the changes for next week's material?
Yes, Susanna, can you go into that revenue and adjust that revenue by 36,000? And that reduces the general fund subsidy by 36,000 as well.
Progress. All right, let's, unless there's anything else on that item, we'll move on to the revisit, discuss, and possible actions on the additional departments. These are in the same sequence that we took them from the beginning as well. I want to thank staff for the changes that we discussed. In addition to that, I noticed there were some additional changes that we didn't discuss, so thank you for tightening up a couple of those areas. Were there any specific questions on any items in admin that anyone wanted to visit?
Let me get it out.
Michael, one quick question.
Charles?
We had a couple items that staff was going to come back to us on with a breakdown of costs, specifically IT maintenance fees and utility fees. Have we received those yet?
Good catch. That was my note too.
Beat you to it.
Regine has been, there you go, Regine, go ahead.
That was actually me. Yes, they have been broken out. So let's find it on here.
Yeah, I think on the first page, Charles, in that far right-hand corner column under IT management, 5343, there's a breakout on the different expenses in there.
So yeah, here's we've broken it out here, and then it's broken out into PD as well. There was an additional oh wait, sorry, wrong one. Here it is. IT management is here. I believe it's in court as well. Public Works. IT management. There it is.
There's an IT charge for several of these components: Public Works, Police Department, and the admin. And my question is, are these separate, or do they all come out of that number for admin?
Well, it's all part of the general fund, so it's all part of the same pool of income, but it's broken out based on what department uses how much.
Well, corollary to that is, in several of these, you have like park, under public utilities, you have the park and recreation, you have this and that, and there's a salary attached to it, and it's like $3,000. And that doesn't make any sense. And you've got insurance attributed to them too, but you've also got insurance in admin. How does that work?
Well, I am unsure of what you're asking. So you're saying there's different costs, or the same cost broken out between different departments? Is that the question you're asking?
No, I'm saying, is each of them coming out of the general fund? And are you attributing a portion of their time for the employee? You obviously are not paying anybody $3,000 a year.
Dr. Browning, we're on IT.
Can you give me a specific?
Yeah, I know. It's the same thing in IT management as it is in these others I was bringing up. I was actually trying to save time.
Can you give me like a specific example of what you're looking at?
Well, I can't move your page. You can go to any Public Works, you can go to park supervision, you can go to whatever. And there's insurance and annual salary and so forth. There it is.
These are
associated
allocated.
with. Yeah, go ahead, Suzanne.
Yeah, they're allocated to the different departments because It's the same concept. So a maintenance tech puts this percentage of their time in public works projects. So they allocate accordingly based on what department they are working in. So like 10% goes into public works and 10% of their salary goes into utilities or whatever, based off of specifically how much time they spend on each department.
Yeah, that's the answer to my question. But if you had a citizen come in and access this, there's no way in the world they could figure that out without some kind of descriptor that says that.
It doesn't show it as well here, but if you go to OpenGov, it shows it in OpenGov based on department. You can look at it based on department, based on person. So for instance, if you wanted to look at one of the maintenance techs.
So where's the description that says that component of the budget is part of the general fund?
We don't have it broken out specifically like the percentages in the descriptions, but if that's something you want, we can start adding the percentages per
Is in every
in the
budget.
description.
And there's, I would repeat what I said. There's no way that a citizen can come in here and figure this out. No way.
Well, if they'll sign up and get on the committee, we could use a few more folks. Takes a little bit spending some time in this. I agree, Dr. Browning, it's complicated.
Susanna?
Is it necessarily complicated, or could the complication be taken away by a better overall description of how the budget is put together? You can't just throw these numbers at somebody and expect them to figure all that out. It's taken me several months to do that, and it's still boring and not obvious, and sometimes there's a descriptor and sometimes it's not. But there's no descriptor in here whatsoever that says that comes from the general fund that I can find.
All right, can you put a note in there, Suzanne?
Yeah, I'll add it.
Regine, somebody. Suzanne.
So I just have a question. So Dr. Brown, are you saying that you can't tell this comes from that this is in the general fund budget?
No, I couldn't. It's taken me months to do that. And it was a guesstimate. It doesn't say that anywhere. It's just a number with no description attached that this is a partial payment of salary based on the general fund.
But so what maybe we need to do is just label this as because we are in the general fund budget. You're not looking at any other budget. You're looking at the general fund budget. So maybe if we just label this general fund budget, that might solve that whole of what budget you're in when you're looking at these documents.
I don't think so. Who knows? Does the average citizen never look at one of these budgets know what the general fund budget is compared to the rest of the budget? No, there needs to be.
I misunderstood what you're saying then, Dr. Browning. I wasn't clear either, but what you're saying is there's nothing that shows that this sheet is actually a general fund expenditure. And I think, Regine, the point is that after admin expenses at the top of the sheet, if we did have general fund, perhaps that would add some clarity. Is that what you're saying, Dr. Browning?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
With budget specifically, I also added you guys have received a salaries breakdown. That'll show how much is allocated per department, per person. So this shows the percent allocation per department, and then it also shows the totals of how much they make as well, if that helps at all.
I could only repeat what I've already said, so I'll shut up.
Susanna, you got that though, right at the top where administrative expenses, we can tie that back to general fund. You know, we used to have a graphic. Remember that graphic that Clay did a couple years ago? And it laid out and showed all the different funds, and there were pie graphs and how they all fed together. I'll go back and look for that, but that's another document that's gone away. And I think that gave you a visual cue. It was kind of a 30,000 foot examination of revenue and expenses per department. So I think that might be helpful as well, because it took that general revenue and showed all the different pieces that made up that pie. I probably still got that. Regine, I'll bet you still have that.
That's a pretty simple pie chart to make from the summary page on this Excel sheet. It's not hard at all.
Yeah, I think to Dr. Browning's point is taken maybe at the top for those, right? It's we know because we do it, but I think for those that want clarity, and we should provide that. And so I think his point is, let's title at the top where those funds come from. What funds that department? Yeah.
So I do have that form. I will share that with Susanna and Sylvia, and I imagine it's something that'll go on the OpenGov section. But I know which one you're talking about. That would be a good. It just shows what is what in all the funds where they go.
Yeah, I think it'll help add some clarity to that. It was a good visual tool.
Yeah, it's not a pie chart, Sylvia. It's a I call it the chart, but it's not a pie chart. Something else.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Anything else in admin?
I have something else in admin.
Go ahead.
We did put in or Susanna did put in the correct amounts for the software maintenance. So we finally got the different changes. So just wanted to bring that.
Saw that in the breakouts. So in red. Thank you for that. Yeah, guys, if they made the changes that we talked about, I'm just going by it. If anybody wants to stop and chit chat, that's fine. But I went back through and substantiated most of that. So we're on to
comment, please, Michael.
Charles.
It was, I don't know if it was the last meeting. I think it was it was the last meeting. I had brought up a suggestion, and I thought it was taken to heart, but apparently not, because it hasn't been implemented. But the many of these items have a double, triple booked, quadruple booked, and that's, I know I'm not using the correct terminology, but where these GL items appear in more than one fund or budget. And I made a suggestion that another column be placed in these sheets. Now, maybe we could do it from OpenGov. I tend to be focused on using the sheets where, a particular item that shows up, or GL that shows up elsewhere, would be so indicated on the sheet. So we'd know how to get the roll up of what the overall expense, it's always an expense, right? What the overall expense is. And I remember Wanda talking about doing it in a different way, where there'd be another column where that, instead of showing where this GL appears in other budgets, there would be another column that would show the total expense that would indicate if it's different from the expense attributed to whatever account or budget we're looking at, it would indicate that it shows up elsewhere in the overall budget.
Susanna, don't you have that column that shows all instances?
Yeah, I thought we did that.
I do have that column, but again, I haven't had a chance to go through and
you're going to scrub
verify.
That.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to go through and scrub it yet.
Okay. And something else, I mean, for what these are worth, that's why I don't want to belabor this. I know we're at the tail end of the cycle. It's more suggestion maybe than anything else. I don't know if I'm using the correct terminology, but when we look at these various budgets, particularly, budgets that deal with manpower, politically incorrect person power, we have a salary, and then we have all this breakout, all these various benefits that associate with salary. And if those could be nested, if a salary could be representative in a complete number, and then maybe a sub ledger that breaks out what that salary encompasses, all the little pieces and parts. And it could reduce, I think, the complication of these sheets, lower the number of items, make it cleaner, make it more understandable. Because, you know, we're hearing the consistent remark. I've said it a lot. Dr. Browning sure took the opportunity tonight to talk about it. The fact of how complicated this is and how unnecessarily complicated we believe it is. So, again, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to just, you know, and the descriptions, so many of them are not only incorrect, they're cut and paste errors. I mean, it's just sloppy. It's just really sloppy, and it's hard. It's really hard. These descriptions are very important to help me understand what's going on. I mean, I got corrections, questions all over this thing, but I can't bog down the meeting with all of my little picayune questions and complications. But it's just so hard for me to be an active contributor to this process. Sorry. Thank you.
So Charles, we welcome you to call, you know, before the meeting. I mean, you guys got this stuff, you know, Monday. It's been in the works. Anytime that there's comments, you can call any one of the three of us and we can walk through them, because really, if one of you has comments, most of you have comments. And so it would be wonderful if we were able to take some of that information beforehand and address it. So when the meeting comes, I mean, we could highlight it. We could do whatever we need to do. The worksheets right now are so that they're linked. Anything, any little movement, you know, you can immediately see the model. I agree that the worksheets are unnecessarily complicated. I wholeheartedly agree. The move to OpenGov was to uncomplicate this. There was some reticence to move in that direction in this budget cycle. But my hope is from September, when this gets turned over, to when we start working on budget again, which will probably be January or February of this next year, that we've got a better handle, we got a better comfort level, and the information that's readily available can be easily dissected. Fund accounting isn't easy, it isn't simple, and it's messy. Yeah. I don't know why it's that way, but those are the rules we follow. But I don't disagree. This can be a whole heck of a lot easier. I don't disagree at all.
Well, thank you, Sylvia. I appreciate
and
that.
On top of that as well, I've talked with Michael Francis about this a little bit, but doing a like open for whoever, but specifically for the Budget and Finance Committee, like a crash course in governmental fund accounting, like telling everybody this is what the rule is behind this and how these all tie together and why it's done the way it is, to kind of help everybody understand why this looks the way it does currently.
I would sure support that. I asked for that the second meeting I attended of this committee. And I appreciate the comments about calling. I started to do that, and I will make an effort to do that beforehand and go over some of these things.
Yeah, and Suzanne and I've talked, and we realize, you know, if you don't have any accounting background, it is very complicated, especially when you get thrown in the mix of it. And it's a very complicated budget. It is hard to understand, Charles, Dr. Browning. I completely sympathize. But
yeah, but that's not my problem. That's not my problem. I'm not talking about being too stupid to understand this. I'm talking or not having the accounting background. I actually do have a little accounting background. I'm talking about an unstructured approach, as far as I can tell, an unnecessarily complicated approach. Okay, so I mean, you can take that what it's worth. Don't come back at me and try to, you know, and imply that I don't know what I'm talking about here. I'm telling you that this is unnecessarily complicated, and nobody has been able to prove that to me otherwise.
Okay, my apologies. That was not my intent. What I'm realizing is when people come onto the committee, it's difficult to get up to speed where the rest of us are in terms of having swam in the pool for a while. And so the conversation was, how can we get people who come on the committee more in line with the rest of the committee quickly, so that when we get to budget, and not having the frustrations that you guys are having. I don't like it, but we're knee deep in it now, so I don't know how to fix it at this point. But I think Susanna's points are very well taken for next year as we head into this, that we spend a little more time with some of the background work to get some of this stuff out of the way and get those questions answered. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. And, you know, I mean, I made a suggestion earlier that would make things easier and it didn't get implemented. Okay. So, you know, I mean, it's just maximizing the frustration here. And this whole COVID business, this whole virtual meeting crap, I mean, it all exacerbates things. I know that's we have no choice in the matter, but it is what it is.
I don't like it either, man.
Thank you. Thank you for tolerating my frustration and my anger.
Okay, everybody's point is a valid one.
Hey,
Right.
Charles, you may think this is complicated, but wait till you have to start learning Chinese.
Let's go on to crime and public safety.
Thank you.
Are there any questions for the chief? Chief, I did have two quick questions. The community partnership and National Crime Night Out, I'm wondering whether those are really essential expenditures in your department? Given what we know right now, those could always be funded later on, but I know public safety is an essential one, but having a community get together doesn't seem like something that we should consider at this point.
What line are you looking at?
5439, 5455.
No, the National Night Out this year, for next year, we didn't plan on spending anything on it. It's kind of hard to make plans for a community get together during the middle of this, so we were going to figure out a way to do something that doesn't cost anything. It won't be any grand show, but we'll certainly take that out. The community expenditures, those are for things like if we get to a point where we can get back together, that's for neighborhood meetings. It'll go toward neighborhood watch, our Eyes on Sunset Valley program for our seniors, and sewing community as well. That's just programs we do to link the department with the community. If depending on how long this pandemic goes, we may not have those items anyway.
But you're good with pulling them for now, and if they need to, we can refund them later if the money's available?
I'm good with pulling a National Night Out. The community fund partnerships is also for things, if we have to help out somebody, say somebody has a window that won't open, some resident, and we may have to go help fix it or something, we may go to Home Depot and spend a few dollars for that. We do certain things like that. I wouldn't want to reduce that completely, but we could probably cut it in half.
Okay. Like I said, if funding becomes available later, we can always add those back. Terry? You're muted.
Yes, I have a question for the chief. In terms of the deficit, that's $119,000, 112 cents, 112. Is that due to reduction of revenues, or is that increased overhead that will continue to be a budget pressure, budget item? Is it a one-time kind of thing, or is this an expansion of your base budget that's related to this?
No, there's most of that is, those are items that were in our general fund budget that were just moved over. There's no new project or anything like that in there. Those would have been in the general fund budget, in our police general fund budget anyway. So we took out all the new projects and anything like that in there.
Was there a time and motion study done to allocate these percentages of salaries?
We're not for a percentage. This is all crime control, and what we were doing is we dedicated about 80% of our time to calls at the at the shopping center. And I wanted to show that, you know, the volume of calls that we're doing. So I just dedicated our senior staff, and like the investigator, the senior officers, to kind of calculating the calls that we go there, the time we spend investigating calls related to the shopping center. We spend much more than that I put in there. I would like to put more, but I knew we would have about 400,000, and I attempted to find as much as I could to put into that crime control budget. When we found out that we couldn't just keep putting the money in there to pay for the building expenses, I wanted to give it back. I mean, to reduce our general fund cost as much as possible. So I started to use the personnel, but I don't have an exact number of how much time they spend on cases directly related to the shopping center or calls related to the shopping center. Most of our direct calls for service are to the shopping center. Most of our proactive activity is to the residential areas.
Yeah, Michael?
Alfonso, and then Mark.
Yeah. Chief, this is a question to you. Chief, I am curious, how difficult is to have the statistics from other shopping centers? So, for example, Barton Creek Mall and other shopping centers, the crime, how many incidents do they have? So sometimes that will give it to us some reference. I don't want to say that we are not doing, because I am looking every day that patrols, and I am looking that they are there. But how much is in other places versus here? Do we have some reference?
I would have to work with Austin PD to see if I could get their stats for the various malls. I could probably find it. It would take a little while to track it down, but we get a report from Austin about the calls in our sector, but not for the shopping centers. But I could try to find some kind of base comparison to see how we're doing.
Yeah,
But
my question, I'm sorry, Chief, because you are as a man. Hello?
Go ahead, I can hear you.
Yeah, as a manager, sometimes it's important to justify. So sometimes not necessary, because you have your patrols, you have the police, we have that, and we understand that the population that they came to the shopping centers maybe is more than 5,000 people, and sometimes in weekends, so etc. But sometimes some criteria than this crime. So as a crime, how much is here? Because I think that will give it to us a better idea how that is working.
Okay. Now, I can do a comparison of calls between us and the other cities. I do know that we take about 4,000 calls a year here. But I can break down our calls for service versus some of our surrounding cities. It's kind of, to just measure things in calls, though, for us is difficult because we offer so many more services than just police calls here in Sunset Valley. We're very proactive. Again, most of our work that we do for the residents is not call generated. We don't get a lot of 911 calls from our residents. We're just out there ourselves, kind of patrolling and looking proactively for calls. But I can definitely get a comparison for you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, my last question is, I don't try to put you, Chief, on the corner, but in reality, sometimes the people, they have the perception of the police is for safety, But sometimes when we say the public, we help the public. And I was a little concerned when you say, don't touch too much that account, because sometimes we need to help people. We need to go to Home Depot and purchase things. So it's important, but I don't know how far the police go with that service with the citizens, because perhaps it's different, the perceptions from some of us than the other people as yourself.
Right. I mean, that's part of just try to be proactive. If, you know, we deal so much with the fear of crime here, more so than like real crime numbers. People see what goes on in Austin, and we try to, these programs are meant to reduce that fear, to let them know that we're here, who we are. That has a tendency to make people not feel like they're isolated. I mean, we're what, 6 miles from downtown Austin, and people watch the news every day. They see what goes on in their surrounding community. The funds in that community safety fund there are for things. We have programs again where we get together with the residents, talk to them, let them know what's going on. It's not just about, if it were just about calls from our residents, the 600 residents that we have, we would only need probably 4 officers, 5 officers if we only dealt with that. We're dealing with the shopping centers. We're dealing with the surrounding areas of the cities, the borders of the cities. And I mean, that explains a lot of the cost here. I mean, to cover the city 24 hours, for instance, 7 days a week, you need 4.2 officers. If you count the hours in a year and the hours in a day to provide coverage, I say in an urban area like this, you need 2 officers working at a time. That's already 8.4 officers on patrol, and we have 8 on patrol. So we're pretty, frugal when it comes to our staffing. I have a comparison of what other departments, what other cities are spending for police services, and we're right at the bottom of those cities. So I think we're pretty efficient for what we spend.
Thank you.
Michael, we can't hear you.
Oops, I'm sorry, Terry, go ahead.
Yeah, Chief, I was looking at your figures again and on the crime control, and I went ahead and took into account the reduction of revenue based on a 25% revenue sales tax reduction, and subtracted it out of the loss, and then I subtracted out the $2,500 for National Night Out, and there's still $67,500 in expenses, and I can't get a handle on where that's coming from. Can you help me with that?
You mean the projected revenues versus expenditures?
No, what I'm doing is I'm assuming that in the past, your budget has not been in deficit on the crime control. This year, going into next year, it's projected at a significant deficit. Part of that is due to the reduction in revenues. So I subtracted that. I took that into account, and also to the reduction in cost on National Night Out. There's still $67,500 in deficit in terms of the budget.
There were other salary expenditures that were placed in there last year when we budgeted it, I just added, I didn't put in benefits and all that. This year, benefits are thrown in there too for those employees that are covered under crime control. Is that what you're, that difference?
Yeah, that, I'm just trying to get at the Budget and Finance Committee recommending to council a budget that has a deficit. And if there's some way we can deal with it.
Most of those are all related to some of the salary expenditures that were there. And also those come out of, that was in general fund last year.
Can folks mute their microphones if they're not speaking, please?
Hang on, Mark. It's Karen. Can you mute her? Cynthia? Thank you.
Karen's muted and the noise still continues.
I don't know who's doing it. Okay, there we go. Terry, did the chief answer your question?
Yeah, I want to give Mark a chance to ask his question. So I'm finished.
Mark.
Well, I think this is in response to what you're asking, Terry, is that, you know, what we're doing is we're putting budget in a fund that has reserves. You know, if you look at our summary sheet, we're going to end the year here with $119,895 in the crime control fund. And so we're essentially, this budget is spending all of that down using, you know, the putting the salaries in this fund rather than coming out of the general fund. You could easily, if you wanted to make this budget match the expected revenue, for example, you could move that salary patrol officer, that 122,000, you'd move it out of this fund, put it in the general fund. Now you'd be, you know, your general fund would be where the money comes out of instead of this fund. So that's essentially that, you know, that you can make that difference. It's just, you know, a question of do we have a deficit in the general fund, or do we have a, you know, deficit here? Overall, we're not reducing police costs. You know, we are reducing police costs, but not by the same percentage amount that we're reducing other areas, right? So we're not reducing police costs by 25%. And that's kind of where we're seeing, you know, the explanation difference here. For this case, you know, because we have that money in the crime control fund, the surplus, $119,000 that we didn't spend on building expenses on the, you know, new building, might as well come out of here. Next year, though, if we're still running at a 25% revenue deficit, you'll have to take this money out of the general fund or make cuts to match that revenue, because you just won't have any money in this fund to pay for the excess costs.
Yeah, you can run it as a deficit this year.
Yeah, you can't run it as a deficit, and I don't think we'd want to push general funds as a subsidy into this fund. That wouldn't make much sense. So
I agree. We could use the reserve to cover it this year, but next year it needs to balance. Yeah, agreed. All right, anybody else on public safety? Or any other items? I think those were our go back items.
I got one question.
Charles.
Item number 28, the 9/11 call share, $59,847. That's the comment claims that it's a fair share. I guess we don't have any choice with that expense. If we want 9/11 backup or dispatching, correct. I guess that number is non-negotiable, right?
And
curious how they figure.
Not at this time, but I've been talking to some of the area chiefs. We're going to go back and negotiate this fair share, because the explanation for that is kind of changing over time. When I first got here, I understood that to be that fair share meant the number of calls that Sunset Valley PD has each year. And that's how I'd explained it to the finance committee, I believe, the first year I was here. I found out, it's been about a week or two ago, that that's based off of some kind of what the county is calling an indirect cost. They haven't fully explained that to us to our satisfaction. So this was kind of late this year in the budget process that this 15% increase occurred, and they are the only game in town as far as dispatching. But the area chiefs, we're going to go back during this budget year and get clarification on this, because this is projected to keep growing 15% per year as part of their fair share, and that's just going to be too high. So over the course of this budget year, we're going to attack this particular item here and see what we can do to keep that from going up 15% every year like this.
Thank you.
Would there be any option to get a private vendor or some other city complex to let us get bids from them on providing the service?
Yes, we're going to have to look at, if we can't come to some resolution, we'll have to get creative on this, Mr. Browning, because that number is projected to get up close to what the fire contract is, and that's just not going to be acceptable.
No, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, I remember the past chief saying the same thing, Lynn, that it was driven based on our call volume. We've always just said it was one of those costs that we didn't have any control over, but what I'm hearing you're saying is that's not in fact the case.
No, they've added these, what they call indirect costs, but we haven't gotten an explanation of what that is. And I think they were even saying like the federal indirect cost, these items, HR costs, all kinds of things that we need to sit down with them and go over this, because, that dispatch center was paid for a while back with county tax funds, and it almost appears as though we're reimbursing rather than paying our fair share. So we're definitely going to look at this for the years to come.
Great, thank you, Terry.
The company I worked for, we did have public funds and private funds and federal funds. And we dealt with this indirect cost item. And it's a negotiated rate that an entity that's getting federal money negotiates with the feds. I've never heard of that being passed on like that before. That's unique to me. Just wanted to provide that information.
It seems unique to me as well. We're going to look at it. I just got off the phone with another chief yesterday about this item.
How many police departments access that?
All of the ones, with the exception of Lakeway, all of Rollingwood, Westlake Hills, Mustang, all the small departments around Austin are accessing the centralized dispatch, with the exception of Lakeway. They have their own dispatch.
City of Austin goes through that as well? Or they have their own?
They go through it, but they're in the same building, but they have their own dispatch.
Okay. All right, let's move on to, unless there's any other questions for the chief, on to court expenses. Any questions on court? It's 8:30. We can pick this up next week or continue on if you'd like.
I'll make a motion to do it next week.
How's that, Dr. Browning?
I said I'll make a motion that we adjourn and do it next week.
Okay.
I got one quick question to, if we're still talking about court expenses.
There's a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Oh.
Nope. Sorry, Dr. Browning, no second on your motion. Charles?
Well, I have got to adjourn, so I'll see you next week.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Charles?
was on court expenses. I was looking at a couple items that I noticed kept coming up again and again and again. And I think that extra column again would be worthwhile, or maybe I need to, to stop forcing myself to go out to OpenGov. But management services, IT management services, it shows up in a number of places, and on court expenses, it's relatively low compared to the IT expenses that show up elsewhere against that same GL. That's a row 19, and also row 22, credit card fees. That seems to be a popular item that shows up in many funds. And, $1,500 in credit card fees. I'm curious how the court manages to roll up that many fees. They barely make that an income, it seems. Where are all those fees coming from? And how it compares to the previous years too, $162, $275, $60, and then all of a sudden, we're at, we go from 500 in an adopted budget, and then in the proposed, we have that, but it's still way out of whack with regard to the rest of the years. I'm curious what that is about.
You're on 5516?
I'm on 5725. 50. Hold on. I'm sorry. Yes, 5516. It's not a big charge, but like I said, it shows up in many places. These credit card fees, and as IT management, that seems to be, like I say, very popular, and that number gets very large when you total it all up.
Yeah, I do know that the council adopted that policy where they bundle up these big contracts and they go out. And so even though it's sprinkled in here, that if I'm remembering that correct, Sylvia, that gets bundled up and those kind of contracts get bid out competitively.
Correct. And we are coming up to IT management services. The only reason we didn't do it this year is because we were already in the process of a server migration and some really large projects. It wouldn't have made sense to do it this year, but that one is coming up for bid next year. And then our IT management also had, we sort of selected the lowest of the low plan, and everything else was an add-on. So we were paying a la carte prices for some things, and it just doesn't make sense. Now, Court uses a product called Encode. I'm not sure. Encode is a software product that's used by small cities. The parent company is called Tyler Technologies, so they have everything from small cities to giant cities, and they have an all-encompassing software suite. So I'm not sure why we're on several different softwares for financials and payables and court and building permits, and but it's also because we're only paying certain modules, right? And the modules are very expensive. This is also a time where maybe as we're leaning off of some of our other software vendors, it's a good time to look at leaving Encode or trying to find an alternative, more less expensive solution.
Great. Yeah, those numbers, they jump out on you when you see them on the different sheets, all the IT support and maintenance software. It's, we always say, well, we can just add the software, but it's just the back end. It's kind of like buying a piece of land, and then it's all the maintenance to do that. It drives these other costs that seem to be exponential in our budget.
Yep. And the credit card fees is the same thing. We sort of get, I don't want to say we get double charged, but there's a fee from the credit card company, and then there's a fee from Encode also, and then any of the other vendors that process that. Even though the language in the background, so to speak, is the ACH transaction happens every time it goes through a portal, we're being assessed a little bit through that portal. So those credit card fees used to be passed along. They're not passed along right now during our COVID process, but it is something we really should be charging that really should be included in the cost of making a payment. It is, you can't call it a convenience fee, but you can call it a overhead or handling fee, something like that.
Michael?
Regine?
I just want to clarify something on the IT management services. Those fees this budget does not include Encode. That is the Univista charges. The Encode charges are under software maintenance, which I believe Susanna can put on OpenGov. There's a breakdown of what exactly we pay in IT management, what services, because IT management is strictly our servers and the backup of all 42 computers that we have, including the MDCs and all the extra computers, PD hash for their services and things like that. And the software maintenance is the Encode. So both of those costs are really high, and it's something we should need to look at, but that's not under IT management.
We have 42 workstations.
Yes, and there are, for some of the employees that have left, there's several of us that are due for new upgrades to the computer. So we have Windows 7, which is, you can't get support for that anymore from anywhere. So
Right.
we're going to Windows 10, but instead of buying new computers, we're going to take those computers that have been already replaced and move them into those spots. I think there's 5 of them like right now. So that will reduce that number by a little bit, but and that's in that IT management cost. So we're working. Matt and I were just talking about that today. Who's going to get what computer and stuff like that. So that will save a little bit of money there, probably around $4,000, but I don't know exactly. And what Suey says on the credit card fees, we do collect a 3% charge for people that use their card to offset those charges, but we cut that with the COVID-19 because it was utility payments, and it's in utility fees, it's in court, and it's in admin. And admin are like for permits and stuff like that. And so once the COVID is over, we'll start charging that 3% again. So we do have a lot of credit card payments, especially right now. That's the only, like court, that's the only way people are paying.
And that was a council action?
I am not quite sure when we cut that 3%. I think when we were cutting, I'd have to look that up to see, but we haven't done that since the COVID thing started.
So what will trigger that to start back?
I don't know. That's something I think that would be in the recovery plan. I don't know.
Sylvia?
Yep, it was part of the big overall budget that we presented when we had a reduction of revenues and a reduction of expenses. That was a discussion that it was already tough for folks to be making their, or going to be tough for folks to be making their payments. But definitely, we've included it in this budget as if it's coming back. So we don't anticipate it staying gone forever.
Okay, so it's in the next budget.
Yes.
Okay. All right, we're on to Public Works.
Terry has his hand up. I don't know if that's a leftover hand or.
Mr. Cowan?
Yeah, it was a leftover hand.
Okay.
And then Charles Goyette has his hand up.
Charles?
Thank you. I got a lot of questions on Public Works, but one thing I wanted to say from the get-go, another question, suggestion, we see dashes in this, in this presentation, this spreadsheet. And, and sometimes it seems like sometimes those dashes in a cell would represent a non-applicable type status, like it didn't apply. It wasn't, that particular item wasn't engaged back when. But then in other cases, it represents a 0, right? I mean, that's the way it looks like to me. And maybe we want to distinguish when that item wasn't applicable, or that charge, that expense wasn't applicable, versus when it was something that was zeroed out, or maybe,
So if it wasn't applicable, leave it as a dash, but if it's a 0, zero it out.
Well, I think that would provide more information, personally, because in some cases it seems clearly that it just didn't apply, but in others it's like, well, is that just a zeroed out item? Like the like the salary, the row 5, right? There's a dash there. I mean, that's administrative clerk. I mean, do we not have one of those anymore?
Not in Public Works anymore, no.
Okay. All right. Right. That's Brianna. So, that's is that I guess I don't know how that would apply. Would it be a non-applicable or a zero? I mean, anyway, just
I always take those as a zero.
because some of the items, they're historical, like the line item kind of came into existence, but that line item is reflected all the way back to fiscal year 2015, and it's it may not have been present at that time, right? May not have been
So that
engaged.
maintenance tax GG and that maintenance tax DV weren't charged to this particular account in 15, 16, or 17. They began to be charged in 18 and 19. So I see what you're saying. It would have been NA in those prior years, and then Brianna's position, for example, would actually be actually that'd be an NA this year as well too, because it's not a funded position. It was eliminated.
And so on this first page, I just would like to make a couple other statements on Road 31, urban forestry. According to again, that's one of those items that's been kind of broken off. Some of it applies to some of that expense was transferred to the venue budget, right? The venue tax. So it really isn't urban forestry any longer, is it? It's something else. It's hazard mitigation, street, like a roadway tree maintenance item. I mean, it's not really urban forestry any longer. And I was looking at, again, Road 37, more IT, right? IT management services. Now that's almost a $10,000 item. So you pretty much explained that, but I see that item many places.
Urban forestry, I will definitely tell you, is definitely a risk mitigation. It is definitely part of that fire mitigation. But in the urban forestry, in the part that's in the general fund, where we are cleaning those right-of-way sections, or we are having to take down a downed tree or something like that, that's causing a public safety issue that isn't necessarily part of the green space conservation area and isn't necessarily part of the street. It just, for whatever reason, something's in an area, we got to go in and chop it down or take care of it. I'll let Carolyn speak to if $4,000 is the appropriate number for that, because you're right, there is a good portion of it that's embedded in the green tax already.
Yeah, and I was also picking on just the designation, but you know better than I. It seemed like urban forestry, by virtue of it being split away, it's a subset of the overall description now, and maybe urban forestry is a little grandiose. It seems like it would be. It's a more mundane effort. It's all about mitigation, hazard, keeping the streets clear. I don't know if that would be an urban forestry term, but maybe it is.
My question on that one is, on the last sheet it was 3,000 and now it's 4,000. So I'm not sure why that took a jump. Carolyn?
I'm not sure where the 3,000, what sheet was it that was the 3,000 was on?
Yeah, it was 3,000 on the other sheet. Now it's 4,000.
Which sheet? Last week's or?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think on last.
That's a Susanna question.
The only reason that would have changed is if we discussed it with Carolyn, but I don't think I changed that one.
Yeah, I went back through and I just did all the changes in OpenGov, so I think it was 4,000 before, and I don't know if something just got, I don't know why it would be different.
But to Charles's point about if most of this is in the venue tax, and this really is risk mitigation, not necessarily urban forestry, is 4,000 the appropriate number?
Yes, I would say 4,000 is the appropriate number. And I say urban forestry is an overarching term that covers a variety of activities and a variety of different things that we do with trees. So here it is more hazard mitigation focused, and the green tax, it may be more focused on stormwater control and things like that the trees do, and tree maintenance and health. So I think it is a great overarching term for what urban forestry is. And I do think $4,000 in the general fund is an appropriate amount for this budget.
Well, if we have a tree that hits the street, it's got to get drug out. So, there's got to be some money in there. That's fine. Does that work for you, Charles?
Yes, that's fine.
I wanted to ask a question on 42, Trails Master Plan. What would we be doing with the Trails Master Plan that would be considered essential?
Trails master plan would be a lot of things such as I think I cleared up the definition a little bit. It would be more on the lines of any signage that breaks down. We have a lot of people on the trails right now. Anything that has to be just repaired, that's more of a infrastructure type item with the trail. So like signs and things of that nature, not necessarily like we have trails and footpath at another point. That's going to be more along the lines of the surfacing and the granite gravel specifically in those areas. But this is going to be the signage and other things that are part of the trail infrastructure.
Other questions for Carolyn?
Item number 53, row 53.
Ice service? Oh,
Ice
yeah,
service.
you were going to get a cost on the ice machine for that.
I went to Amazon and I found one, 440 pounds in 24 hours, brand new, free shipping, $1,699.99. I mean, we could buy a new one each year and still make out in the process.
Charles, will you send me that, please? Because I truly want to look at that. And I know that the committee said no to cutting coffee service, but we went to one coffee service, and that's among the PD who use it the most. And the rest of us really don't even use it. So we sent back the big Keurigs, and we bought one coffee machine for an extraordinary amount of savings. So if you have a machine that will do the same thing for us, please send that to me in a link. I'm happy to look into it.
Okay, we'll do.
And I would repeat what Charles. I looked up a couple of different ones, and that's something I didn't change the amounts on here, but it is something that could come out. And like Sylvia said, we can look at that and put it in as just a new item, and it would be a one-time purchase.
Right, so I'm going to make a note. The next year this is going to go away because you're going to buy an ice maker with this, and
or buy some ice trays.
Well, the point is, if you look at the last 4 or 5 years, we could have bought, anyway. I tried last year and didn't get anywhere. All right. Charles? Was that it?
Well, there's a couple more items actually, like towards the bottom of the page. These repair items are another sort of, it gets spread out into multiple funds. And I was just looking at, row, for example, row 65, 57, GL 5745. It talks, if you look at the description, it talks about how, that some of this expense was allocated to the venue tax, but yet if you look at what we've allocated and compare it to years past, or to, fiscal year 2019, the expense is about the same, but yet now it shows up in two places. And some of these other charges, comparing the proposed to the FY19, like for example, row 67, that went up 20%. Row 68, that went up almost 50%. So, there's we're supposed to be cutting back, but there's many of these items on this page seems to have, you know, if anything, the tendency has been they've increased since fiscal 2019. General finding, not too specific, but just general finding. And like I say, these repair and maintenance items, they're problem prone because they show up in multiple places. They get split out, and we seem to do a lot of repair and maintenance. And we got relatively good stuff. I mean, we got a brand new backhoe. Hopefully that won't be needing repair anytime soon.
One of the things we also talked about, we've got 5 trucks for how many people now in Public Works? 5? So everybody has their own truck?
We do have 5 trucks and we do have 5 people. However, due to COVID-19, we're also all driving individually in trucks for the most part.
Well,
you can't social distance in the truck.
Yeah.
You gotta love COVID-19, man.
I think that's a luxury then that we don't need. Everybody doesn't need to have their own car. We're not the police department. And if we're driving, all those costs have not gone down. We've reduced staff, but our maintenance and repair and all that, we're keeping 5 trucks busy at the same level that we were when we had 11 employees. I don't buy it. But we don't have time to dig into your numbers.
But that was my general comment on this page, is that the numbers to me looked fat. They looked fat. And like you say, Michael, the fact that, you know, the Public Works Department has been cut back pretty significantly, but none of their expense numbers, or at least on this page, I should reserve my comments to this page, those cutbacks are not reflected in these numbers.
Well, remember too, Charles, if they don't spend it, it doesn't get allocated, right? So if there's not a maintenance charge for, like if it doesn't need new tires, they don't spend that money. So I think when we look at these numbers again next year, we should see a significant change in some of these. And I think, as Sylvia pointed out earlier, we got derailed on that this year, but we'll start way earlier next year.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
Process, so I hear you, bud. All right, anything else in Public Works? And Carolyn, thank you for making the changes that we discussed.
You're welcome.
All right, on to general government. Anything there? Anybody wants to go back to? I do want to point out that I believe item 12, that is the parking lot rent for the Sunset Valley Market, for the, not Market Fair, for the Farmers Market. Is that my understanding of that, Sylvia?
Yes, that's correct.
So that is a cost. Now that's not coming out of hot funds.
No.
Just a point to the committee. And maybe that should come out of hot funds. I'm not sure it can because it's to lease school district property. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't believe it can come out of hot funds, but
Seems like it's intimately connected with the.
Excuse me, Chairman?
Hang on, Alfonso. Charles?
Yeah, I mean, it seems, I mean, Sylvia knows better than I am, just sort of kind of exploring the question. I mean, there's no other reason for this expense except for the Sunset Valley Farmers Market. So why, you know, it's intimately connected, right?
Is that a wash for us?
Excuse me?
It's a wash. We collect the revenue from the farmer's market
Okay, that's right.
for the parking lot. It's a wash.
Yeah, you're right.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, that was a wash. I'm sorry.
Sounds
You're right. All right. Anything else there?
No, excuse me, Michael.
Yes, I'm sorry.
I couldn't understand. The $5,200 is, the concept for that is for is something that we pay to the Austin district. No, we pay that money to the Austin district for the rent of that space, and that space we use for the market, and we use the market for hot funds. So follow the route.
As Regine pointed out, it's a wash anyway, Alfonso.
Okay, but I think that it's obvious that we are spending that money, and in reality, it's not general fund; it's a hot fund. But that's okay.
Well, the point is that the farmer's market pays that money, pays us $5,200. There's a revenue associated with that property lease.
So we give them hot funds and they give it back.
Pretty much.
There's government accounting for you.
I think that's a perfect indicator.
Yeah. All right, we're on to utility expenses. Anybody have a go back item there?
No, well, just except for the fact that all of these familiar items keep showing up, right? You know, so office supplies, credit card fees, bank management fees. That's something else that showed up in a number of places. And it's like, you know, bank management fees, $2,000, no description. So it didn't give me a lot of indication what that was really all about. But I would like to understand that $2,000 charge. And, you know, if you compare it to fiscal year 2019, it's significantly different,
Yeah, I had a note here too, Regine. Why, if we budgeted 2,000, maybe we covered this last, is it 800, you only spent 840? Or the anticipated expense is 840.
And it was under 400 for fiscal year 2019.
You there, Regine?
I think the response to that is that column just got reduced mathematically. That $840 is an error, but I don't know what the actual amount is going to be this year. Regine, do you have that hand?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So those fees are based on what our bank balance is, what our deposits are, what our not online, but like our ACH payments and things like that. That fee is based on that. It's the bank service charge, and it would be a whole lot more, but because we carry such a high balance and things like that, it's reduced, and so that's why it could be reduced. I didn't reduce it for this year because we're not having that much revenue come in, and so our balance is getting lower and lower. But if we're able to maintain the balance that we've got, you know, going now, then that number we probably won't spend that much. Again, we can reduce it, and then if I find it goes up, we can always ask for money. But sorry, I was choking. But you know, we can see we can reduce it, and like I said, if it starts going up, we can always ask for a budget amendment.
It's a small amount, but it just jumps out at you, the disparity, and that's what caught my attention.
And another thing right now is we aren't. I just found out that we're not using ACH very much right now. I need to do something with Wells Fargo to get that changed. So that will increase the number a little bit, because the more ACHs and stuff we do, the more the bank fee is. So. And to Charles' comment, bank fees are only in the admin department and in the utility department. So those are the only two places that shows up, and it breaks it down in the utility department between water and wastewater. Just FYI there.
Hey, Regine, When you do an ACH, do you do a 1 day or a 3 day?
It's usually the next day. Depends on when they approve the payment. Like Tanya does it, and then she sends it to Chief, and then Chief has to approve it when he's able to do that.
You can reduce it quite a bit by going to a 3 day.
That's definitely something I can check into. I don't think I didn't ever hear that before. That's something we can definitely look into. So again, if we want to cut it, we can. It's one of those things where if we want to cut it, and then we can always ask for more later if we need it. If we don't, then we've saved that much money.
Well, again, it's only going to be driven based on the charge, right? So it's kind of like gas. If you need it, you're going to use it. I mean, if the bank fees are.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just know. So they've got $7,500
Where?
for bank fees.
No, they've got 2,000.
That's the total. That's the total across all instances.
Yeah, 2,000. That's right. I was like, wait a minute, but now I realize you added that column. So yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, she's showing the extra column.
Yeah.
You know, I think we've had this conversation before. Of course, interest rates have really dropped. So depending on the balances at the banks, a lot of banks, no fees. But I think there's, if I remember, there's something for government accounts, requires some special accounting probably. Does any of that sound familiar?
And you have the fraud. Yeah, we're not a person that don't get, yeah, so.
Yeah, no, we looked at that.
If we wanted to, I could go to 1,500. I mean, I think that might be, and in 6 months we can revisit, y'all can revisit it.
Well, you know, it's one of those things that they're charging fees, but overall the fees are $7,200.
Yep.
It's because of all those government rules. Carolyn, did we talk last time about mileage reimbursements? If anybody's going to be going on a trip to get training, that's not happening now, right? You're Zooming everything?
Yes. No, everything is not Zooming. For example, we're having to send techs to go do water testing down in San Antonio. So there are still trainings and testing that are happening in person, especially the testing that still happens in person.
But they're going in our truck, right?
Not necessarily. At times they do take their own vehicle.
We can make sure they go in our truck because
that needs to be fixed.
we have 5 trucks. Yeah.
We have plenty of trucks, and
yeah. I thought our discussion last time was to reduce the mileage reimbursement by half or somewhere around that. I thought we had cut that to $1,000 or $1,500. That's my recollection.
We did.
Okay,
we
well,
did cut that. And if I'm not mistaken,
if we take city trucks, then there's no mileage. But anyway, we've got plenty of trucks. All right. Anybody else?
So are we?
Yes.
Are we reducing this by half, or are we taking it off completely?
I'd rather us to take it off. I'm not sure why, because we have plenty of trucks that we would need to reimburse somebody for mileage.
Yeah.
Regine, I have a quick question. Regine, isn't that number include the training? Doesn't that include the per diem in there as well?
Yeah. I was just gonna say that should say training, mileage reimbursement, and per diem.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. Can you adjust the descriptor? Okay.
It says and per diem.
Wait, it includes the training cost itself too in that column, or is that in training and education?
That's in training and education is the actual class.
Okay, so it's just mileage and per diem in that one.
Right.
All right, I just had one last one, and I didn't see a note on my sheet from last time on the line item 129, the brush chipping program. Don't we have a chipper?
We do have a chipper. However, the brush chipping program is one where we're bringing in PDS to chip the giant pile that is behind City Hall, and that's when they bring in the big tub grinders and put that through. So the chippings that come out of an actual brush chipper that we use is not what you would want to be putting on your yard. And so the stuff that comes out, so even though we chip our stuff and bring it back, it also goes through the grinder. So that is the price to grind everything at the storage yard. And it is actually reducing because we have a pretty good deal with TDS.
So this gets back to that conversation of providing a service of mulch that people want and the actual cost to the city, staff time, mulchers. There's $12,000 in grinding fees, so we can provide mulch for people. Is that right?
Mulch for people, it's the brush that people drop off as well. So when people bring the brush to the yard, that's when we also have that. That's part of the expense as well.
Last year we bought a whole new system controlling the gate and clickers, and remember that whole shebang? That was to eliminate certain people that were coming in and dropping off their work-related products. How did that turn out?
I don't think that's been done as far as I know.
We did change out and put in a new like card entry, so everybody has their own card. However, it does not, like, we have no way of tracking exactly who comes in. It's not that fancy of a system.
I thought the idea was people had to come and get a card from the city.
Yeah, it doesn't stop. I mean, it's apparent to us that there's a lot of commercial use on the weekends where maybe a resident has hired a landscaper and has given that landscaper the card because there's, you know, there's an inordinate amount of stuff that comes in over a weekend, truly. It's this cost, and I think somewhere else is another $7,000 cost. Oh, there it is, right above it, the utility dumpster rental. Those things get full. And again, as Carolyn said, what you guys have is a card reader. You don't have something that can track. And for example, it just doesn't, that's not what you guys paid for.
So there's another subsidy, Terry. People are getting the brush hauled off and dumped at the city, and they not having to pay for it to be dealt with. So, okay.
Michael?
Alfonso?
Yeah, I think that we passed one account, the 5835, that is utilities. And we discussed that last week because it was in administration. And in that utilities, they have the 3 departments or buildings with $92,000. That was in general fund in administration. And now you can have also that in water. In page 15, you will see that, and they have utilities, $3,000, and utilities, $1,000 for wastewater. So you have first 92,000, then they try to break, but also you have another $4,000 in water and wastewater. So we are talking now $96,000 in utilities, and it's a lot of money. If they can go at this moment, they have a utility. You can go to page number 6. In page number 6, you will see that in 5835. I cannot move the computer, so the Sylvia or Susana, they can move that, but I cannot move that. So they can move that to page 6 if they want.
Yes, Susanna's got the controller.
There's 92,000 there and 96,000 on the other page.
No, later you will go to page number 15,
It's
and they have
90,000 total.
that $3,000, and later in page 16 another $1,000.
$58.35.
58.35.
What department is page 15 that you were just talking about?
Water. Utilities. I'm sorry, utilities. In utilities you have water.
No, water department.
It's in the row 46. Page 15, row 46.
Michael?
Yes.
So I believe Susanna, I don't know if she's got it on OpenGov yet, but we provided, or she's got a list of all the utilities that are covered under that code. It's it's all electric, water bills, IT, internet. I mean, there are a lot of phone. All that is covered under utilities. And we can provide that list. Or she might already have it on there. I don't know. But there are. We review it every year, and y'all have seen it before. What list? I mean, there's a page of utilities that covers.
Yeah, I think that we discussed that 3 years ago. Right. 3 years ago, they used to have in three all together in public works. And we tried to say we need to put that some in police, some in administration, and some in public works. Yeah. At that time, we were looking $27,000. Now, boom, with the new building and etc., that came so high. First to 75, now it's 92. But in addition of the 92, I can see other 3,000, another 1,000. Only then I try to say this is going up, and it's a lot of money.
And that's even with the solar panel.
And less employees.
But if you look at the Susanna, do you have that breakdown on OpenGov yet?
I'm gonna have to track it down. Okay. I think I have it.
The amount of water that we use to water things, that's a big part of it. This building really doesn't have a big bill because of the solar, and then the heated buildings have made it increase a little bit, but it's not just the electric bill. It's the phone system we have, which is almost $1,200 a month. Yeah. It's the the charges for the MDCs and the police department. And I know that we had wanted to break this down into like PD and things like that, which we can do, but then we're going to get to the whole thing. Well, it's here, and it's easier to keep track of it in one place. But I mean, we could definitely break it down if we needed to, but we do that internally and keep track of what the monthly costs are.
Yeah, I remember reviewing.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I don't want to discuss that, but 3 years ago we said we need to allocate expenditures where we are doing that expenditure. So if the police, they expend that money in telephones and in that kind of things, needs to be in the police. If that is administration, it's administration. So that doesn't mean that we need to do it in the easy way. We need to do that in the proper way. With respect to the water, we try to use the pond to do irrigation. So we have a problem because the pond is not there. But the money is coming up, and not necessarily some houses, if we try to save money, we are a bad example because we are wasting a lot of money in that kind of things. This is my opinion.
Well, I made a note here for us to take another look at 5835 to make sure we're allocating that properly. Okay, it is almost 9:25. Shall we call it an evening and then pick up next week at Street? Any objection to that?
No.
Michael,
Good idea.
I would just add that if anybody has any questions, please send those to us before the meeting. We can work out as much as we can. If anybody has any questions, please send those to us before the meeting. We can work out as much as we can. Because we are getting close to the end.
Yeah, next week is the grand finale.
Because we are getting close to the end.
Yeah, next week is the grand finale. Charles. Okay. Yeah, next week is our last meeting. Yeah, next week is our last meeting. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
I make that motion.
A motion.
Okay, is there a motion to adjourn? John made a motion.
I'll make a
Alfonso
motion to adjourn.
second that.
Yeah, we were doing together. Yeah, he can be first because he can be first because he's older than I. Yeah. First
He
can be first because he's older than I.
Alfonso, we need to see your face. Alfonso, we need to see your face.
You can see that?
I can't see your face. We want to see your face. Oh, there you are. Take off the mustache. We want to see your face. There's the nice hair. At least
Yeah, yeah. So I am the second. The motion is I am second. The motion. Yeah. So
we're falling apart here.
The motion is I am second. The motion.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you much. Thank you so much, staff. Thank